Welcome to Journey Through the Gate, your paranormal portal podcast, as we delve into the many questions and wonders brought on by this supernatural experience. What's on the other side of the gate? Let's find out together.
Hey everybody, how you been this wonderful week, huh? Everybody good? We're all here. I hear purring. I have co-hosts that are purring. It's funny because I put the basket out and I said, "Hey, you want to go say hi to everybody?" So, little Boo just looked up at me and went, "Meow." He has the longest mew. You know, those kittens that'll hold a mew, and and at the very end, it just, it's like it gave everything he had in this one mew. Yep, basket full of fur. You want to come say hi? Come on. I can hear you purring from here. Can you guys hear the purring? Can you hear it? Hear the little spirit? Say hi, baby. Let me get you in the green screen here. There you go. There's your pretty face and your handsome eyes. His handsome eyes. Look at them handsome eyes. They are gray green. I hope they stay that way. They're the most beautiful color of sage green you've ever seen. Can you believe this? Look, look, look at the baby. Say hi to everybody. All these wonderful people around the world, they love you. And you love them right back. See there? See how it works? Your brother want to come say hi? Okay. Here is Mr. Boo. Go back in your basket, sugar. And there's his brother. Oh, my goodness. Look at the face. And his eyes are a little bit darker. Look, see? Look at that. Oh, look at that mug. Look at that. Look at that. Who couldn't love him? Oh my God. Who couldn't love him? And he's just look, just as just like furry clay. I think they've got ragdoll in them or something because they're so mush. You know what I mean? Look at this. Look at that. Look at how could you not feel better looking at that face? Okay, go with your brother. Go with your brother. We got to talk about two other wild cats tonight. So how's everybody doing? They had to say hi because Lord knows they're going to go completely nuts here in a little bit. How you doing? I hope you had a wonderful, wonderful week. I know his eyes be kind. That's what got me. I'll tell you, I looked at a lot of pictures and I just stopped when I saw his face, you know. But their trip, they're doing really, really good. They eat a lot. They've like doubled in size. They're just eat. Hey, Chris Jarvis, how you doing? Jose, did you get a wrench, Jose, out of nowhere? Did you? And somebody else got one too. Who else got one? I was sitting here and I said, how come they don't have a wrench? We need to give them a wrench. They'll only let me give so much. So if you ever get knocked off, I didn't knock you off. I've never knocked anybody off. YouTube will sometimes go in and do a purge or something, and then I got to give everybody back wrenches. But as far as I know, I'm the only one that can give them. So, yep, he's beautiful eyes. Don't you have beautiful eyes? You have beautiful eyes. See, I'm a handsome sucker. Yep, sure am. But they're doing really, really well. My concern is they don't have enough toys. They might not be spoiled enough yet, so I'm working on that. And like I said, they eat a lot. My gosh, yeah. You didn't see that coming, Jose? I didn't either. So I mean, I just saw it in there, and I thought you absolutely deserved one. So you know, you guys know the rules. Follow the other Black Ops mods, and just if you can drop a link, if you can do that to help out, do it. If you can drop the T Public, if you got a link to that, that's great. Especially for guests and things like that, for links to their books, their websites, their anything that they're promoting, help out that way. But main thing is to guard the fort and be a gatekeeper and just watch for all these bots that come in and get them out of here. And hello to everybody that I didn't say hello to. Vixen Doe, hello, be kind. I know I said hello to you, love. Lynn, it's so good to see you here, sweetie. We got to set you up. Yep. Lynn will be here on the last Sunday of the month, every month. I don't know what we're talking about this time, Lynn, but we always come up with something. And, we'll talk about that and see what you want to talk about and just have a good old time like we usually do. And Edna AJK, hello. Ted, hello, sweetie. I saw that the dogs went out and nothing scary to report, which is wonderful. Lots and lots of bacon. So, welcome in, Big Cole. Hello, darling. And Ian, hello. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Glenn, hello. Let's get Donnie in here because this is going to be one of those nights, I think, Mr. Cho and I have brought together.
Hello.
Oh, Donnie Cho.
Hi.
Donnie, do you want to tell them some of your good news? What you want?
Well, I will be I've been asked to be a co-host on another show on Thursdays. And it's called
Look
the
what we
Siru
did.
Papers. SIRU Papers. It's me and Jason McLean, and we are also linked up with Texas Front Porch. I know some of you guys are fans of theirs too, and sometimes they
Well,
have like a multicast uh, episode together, which I'm still not quite sure how that works technically, but yeah, I'll be on that show every Thursday, and then I'll still be
hi,
here,
babies.
Sundays or some Mondays, and yeah,
Yep.
I'm very
There you
excited.
go.
Very excited.
Yep, and I have that's wonderful news. Congratulations, sweetheart. I always like to see people reaching out and doing things and connected. Please do that this week. One week we set out, expect feathers, and somebody said, well, don't expect it. And that's not what I mean. What I mean is expect it. Like used to say, Mr. Dickens expects Christmas. He knows it's coming, and I have to, it's the way you say it and what you mean by that. It's like I expect to
Oh yeah,
hear
I
from
got to
my
mention the
spirit guides.
actual name of the show. It's Jason McLean Questions Everything.
Oh, there you go.
But the name of the channel is the Siru Papers. So if you want to go
Go.
and subscribe to that,
I will be eating chocolate
yeah,
chip cookies tonight. I'm sorry if it's rude. Please bring your own snacks. Feel free to chow down, enjoy your adult beverage or anything else that you might be enjoying.
it
One
would
night
be
when
rude to
Aunt
not eat
Edna
chocolate
shared
chip cookies.
her cream with us, I think it was lavender, vanilla, some kind of peppermint foot cream or something. It sounded wonderful. I said to
Hmm.
add a cup of hot tea with it would be nice. We got to, self care. But what I meant by expect, expect to hear from your spirit guides, expect to hear from your loved ones on the other side, expect the little, mile markers and that of girls and things like that of boys, whatever you want to call them, those connections. And what I mean by that is expecting it and putting that intent out there. I want to connect with these things. I will be more vigilant. I will notice the 1111s or the other numbers that you connect with that you see throughout the day, or the pennies or the feathers or the dreams, whatever it may be. Expect that. That's what I mean, because you connect into your intent. I want to connect into Bigfoot Michigan Rob. I've heard that before. Yeah, that didn't you say that he was used to be on it, now he's not, and he's moved on to do other things, and or he is sometimes, or this name keeps popping up this week, Bigfoot Michigan Rob, and you
Yeah,
think that would be something I would understand.
yeah.
Yep.
Um, I got to push
Okay.
back on you. I got to push back on what you said earlier, Cisco, a little bit about
What?
expecting
um
things.
oh, okay, go ahead.
Yeah. Uh, there was one time where I was expecting and I knew it was going to happen, but it didn't happen. And that was when you and I went to Gettysburg together.
Okay.
And I was expecting to meet women. I was expecting it.
Well,
I was like, I know I'm going to get a phone
somewhere
number this
inside
weekend.
somewhere inside
I know it's
you
going to
doubted,
happen.
Donnie, and they saw your doubt, and it was ruined. It's ruined. So just keep practicing. That's all. Just keep practicing. Wax on, wax off.
I was
Just
like
keep
sure I was going to like
practice.
meet a girl there. I was sure of it,
You know
but
what?
it didn't
Maybe
happen.
you did. Maybe you just couldn't see her. Maybe she's, a spirit that is connected with you that is quietly hanging in the background somewhere. You have to be more specific. Have you not learned anything from the jinn? You have to be, when
Well,
you have three wishes, you have to be so specific. How many twilight zones, how many different things have we seen where you make a wish and it just goes all haywire, you know?
yeah.
But there you go. Thank you, Lindsay. She's
Actually,
dropped
if
the
I got
link
to be
for
honest
the
though,
channel.
if I got to be honest
Thank
though,
you.
I when I was at the when we were at the Gettysburg Convention, I just kind
Hmm.
of looked around at everyone. I was like, "Ooh, these girls are all weird." And I was like, "Never mind."
Well, lower your expectation,
Yeah,
Donnie, and keep
yeah.
practicing. That's all I can say. It's the best advice I can give you. Hey, Michael, how you doing, darling?
Hey, Mike.
Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, welcome. So tonight we are doing a little history tonight, Mr. Laciana. It's so good to see you. Speaking of Gettysburg, um, we're doing Bonnie and Clyde tonight, Donnie.
Yeah,
Hmm. Now again, with the you told me that you kind of like going into this, you knew a little bit about the basics of it.
yeah. I knew some the basic stuff. Not, I didn't go. I never looked too detailed into the story before. Never saw like a movie on it or anything.
Okay. Well,
Yeah, I knew the basics though.
that's a great place to start. Hello, Sue. Welcome in. So that's a great place to start because again, hey Steve, Steve Stockton sent me, and I wanted to tell you too. That was part of the good news and stuff that I wanted to tell you guys. Welcome, Cats on Parade. Um,
Yeah.
I talked to Steve. He's feeling better. Last week, remember, I told you what he was not feeling too good. Got a lot going on. So, but we talked to Steve, and Steve wanted to do. He threw out the idea of doing Dillinger tomorrow night. So we're gonna keep on the 1934. Um, hello, hello, Fletcher. Welcome. All I think Steve said it over everybody. Welcome,
Hmm.
welcome, welcome, Amy. How you doing? How you doing? Thank you so much, Steve. Um, we're going to do Dillinger tomorrow night. There is some paranormal stuff linked up with that story, as well as more betrayal and more, lies and twists in the truth. And, this is where you had mentioned movies. Hello, hello, everyone. Welcome, welcome, welcome. Sasha Bell, hi, darling. Pine Mountain, welcome. Um, welcome to some of the best mods you've ever seen, and I know they're going to make you feel welcome, and they're going to be slinging the bacon. If you get bacon thrown at you, please understand that that's our way of saying we love you and welcome. And we're talking about Bonnie and Clyde tonight. So here's the deal: the movies. That's a perfect way to bring to start right there, Donnie, because this is it when you have history. I once heard the wonderful Jim Morris say that he was so upset that 11/22/63 came out when Stephen King wrote the book. Well, he wrote the yes, tomorrow night too. He'll be live with the wonderful Steve Stockton on Monday Madness tomorrow night at 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, right here on this Bat Channel. So or Cat Channel, probably more of a Cat Channel in it. But and they're all curled up asleep in the basket. I mean, I can't even. You can't write this. I'm telling you, this is amazing. So, the thing that gets me about historical stuff, I kind of like this thing on YouTube where they have historians going up against the historical accuracy of, say, a movie like Lincoln. Okay, you're not so much talking about how did Daniel Day Lewis play Lincoln, but how was things portrayed? Were the battles portrayed in the right order? Were yeah. Thanks for that. Hit the like button, please, if you can. It helps us get up there and YouTube. Why? Because we love YouTube. But please, that would be awesome. Thank you. And it irks me a little bit because once you see it, like Jim Morris said, once you see that, we've spent 25, 30 years trying to say, Oswald was not a lone shooter. A magic bullet couldn't go through all these things and come out pristine. I mean, it's physics, people. I mean, it is. It's common logic. And what happens is they'll mind warp you so much, they'll give you a little bit of truth, and then they'll exaggerate it or twist it in the way that they have to run that narrative, or the way that somebody wants that narrative to go for whatever reason. And then that becomes historical fact to us. Even on these things like Wikipedia, which is, please, people, if you're thinking Wikipedia is like, the encyclopedias that we used to get and everything, please, it's not, because anybody can go in there and edit that, and I could go in tomorrow and put, Bugs Bunny was the 16th president of the United States, and it would sit there for days before somebody changed it or caught it. I'm telling you, it's ridiculous. So go past that, dig down deeper, get into the truth, and you can't just look one place, Donnie. You have to go all over the place and then sift out all the bullshit and try to figure out what the truth is. When you get down these rabbit holes, it gets really crazy. Yeah, see, it's not allowed as a source in college. Well, there you go. And college shouldn't be allowed as a source for education much anymore either. But here, I'm sure there's good and bad and everything. So anyway, when you start, that irks me, and I agree with Jim Mars in saying that they spent 30 years trying to get people's minds into thinking about the truth of something, so at least you remember, history and who did what to who and why, and then it switches up, and 30 years later, after all that work, somebody comes out with a story where it's just Oswald again. And then you've got these museums that are it's just Oswald again. They're going with the narrative. I used to get mad in school when I would read about the Native Americans and things in history books, and things that were skipped over in history books that I knew, in the third or fourth and fifth grade, that was, meant to be to be so. And I'd go home and ask the adults in my life, what's going on here? I thought this happened and this happened. You hear a whole nother real truth to it. So that's always irked me. And how do you feel about that, Donnie? Do you think that once they twist history and they put it up and give you that visual aid, it's like a meme. Once you have that snapshot in your mind of this is how something went down, it almost replaces, what you know to be
Well,
fact.
I think there's a lot of people who twist history, yeah, especially in different portrayals in books and movies, and everyone's got their own little spin to things, right? But a
Mm,
lot of people, the people receiving the history, a lot of people twist history on their own. Like I'm sure
true.
I'm guilty of twisting history to
Hmm.
myself. I'm
Hmm.
sure everyone is guilty of that. I'm sure you're guilty of it too, like we all are, right? Because we
Right,
all
right,
kind of
right.
interpret history our own way, right? And then we
That's
kind of,
true. That's true.
yeah.
But historical events like, you know, um, I can understand. What is it? You got something to say? Boo says it pisses him off too. Boo Cephas isn't having it. So the thing is tell it like it was, and understand that human beings should be allowed to decipher the facts on their own. Facts are funny things. John Adams once said in a semi-famous building called uh, the Second Continental Congress out there in Independence Hall. Um, Facts are funny things, and they should be stated as fact and put out there. So once you start having, you start getting things in it where somebody else has got an agenda, whether it's government, a governor, say, of a state, or a police force, or um, a political side, or cowboys versus the Indians, or whatever it may be, even sports. Oddly enough, everything's going to get twisted and thrown out there. So when you think about Bonnie and Clyde, you think about them as being notorious bank robbers, right? Um, and that's kind of like their claim to fame. And they got shot up in a car, and that they were in love, and it was kind of like they made it like the Romeo and Juliet of the criminal scene. It's 1934. They had a 2-year run. Yeah, question authority, Steve, for sure. They had a 2-year run, a little bit more than that. But when I started digging on some of these things, and I started looking back at some of the movies, and Most of the movies made on this were late 50s. There was one that kind of leaned more towards the Bonnie Parker part of it, about her being this breakout gun moll, the flapper type gone wild, first like Girls Gone Wild back in the day kind of thing. A fashion statement because everybody was, looking and seeing what she was wearing and then mimicking it, which is what she did, as a young girl growing up in, Cement City out there in West Dallas. I mean, in the Dust Bowl after the Depression, in poverty. Think about it. You got to put yourself back there, to try to get in the mind of these kids, because they really were kids, 23, 25 ish.
Yeah.
I think she was
They
22,
were
he was
young.
like 25. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, really, when you see these things and you kind of understand. So, what I want to do is just take you back and peel back some of the bullshit, and really try to understand them. And I want to do it for a couple of reasons. One, up front, I want to say I do not condone what they did. I'm not saying that. You're going to hear me say things throughout this, and just like any other criminal or any other murderer, or or bad guy or bad person that we looked at, I've said this, but I want to try to understand how they get there. How does this kid go from, you know, a 17-year-old baby faced, little schoolboy to America's Most Wanted in a blink of an eye? And, why did Bonnie say she wanted to be alone uh, for the ride? What happened? How did that go down? So you look back at the books, and you look back at the movies, and you look back at the different stuff. Now, Bonnie and Clyde is a little bit like some of the others, like some of the other ones we looked into in the Chicago series, Donnie. So you've got the people. It was far back enough because you're thinking 1930s. Okay, so you're basically what, 90 years, right?
Hmm.
I mean, you're not that far back, and I mean you can reach it. You, we know people that just passed that were alive during that time. You see what I mean? There was a lot of people coming out of the woodwork. The cousin to Bonnie that wanted to tell it like it was, and with the point that she saw, sisters and brothers of each one. A cousin of another guy that ran with the Barrow Gang, because that's what it was called. Um, and they came and they brought their eyewitness accounts, and things that changed along the way, and the things and the facts that stayed the same, and then matched up to things, just like Donnie and I did Amityville, just like we did in the Lincoln conspiracy, just like we did in the McDonald case or whatever else it was. This is the same type of thing, because once you start digging back, you start thinking, you put yourself in that car just for a minute. You're in a 1934 Deluxe V8 Ford, and the Deluxe 1934 was the only year that the safety glass came out, and it had a couple of extra little doodabs and doohickeys, as they called them, and made it an extra special vehicle. But one of the most things that made it extra special is the damn thing could do pretty near 80 miles an hour. And in 1934, in the Midwest in America, right after the Depression or the Dust Bowl, when money is less than tight, it's non-existent, you know. And if it's there at all, it's like the fleeting dust on the wind of the crops that blew away for the past two or three harvests. It's bad. It's real bad. What isn't dust is mud. And people are trying to hack it.
Basically, everyone
Yeah,
is dirt poor.
dirt poor. And
Yeah.
that means also the law enforcement. Now, law
Yeah.
enforcement out there, they were lucky if they were making what, $15-20 a month. I think that'd be a lot,
Yeah.
a month. And they have to provide their own vehicle in most cases and their own firearms.
Hmm.
So most of those are going to be shotguns and pistols.
Yeah.
And if you've got a car in the Midwest, it's more than likely an old farm truck, or a secondhand whatever to try to get around. And this is what they're trying to chase Clyde Barrow in. Clyde Barrow stole cars. Because in 1934, the electric ignition came along, and his big brother Buck taught him how to hot wire a car.
And
And
plus,
once
back
things
then,
turned,
the technology was so new, so cars were way easier to steal. Like if you knew how to do it.
oh, hot
Yeah.
wiring,
They didn't
lickety
have
split.
security measures back then, you know?
It was lickety split.
Yeah.
So I mean, and to the fact that he even sent a letter to Ford saying that that was the most preferred car that he'd like to steal. That V8 was just all right with him. And Clyde also liked and I'll tell you why. It'll come up here later on in the stuff I have to show you. Why he liked to rob armories. So he would rob National Guard armories because he was collecting guns, and he was collecting a lot of guns, and he was collecting them for a reason, and a lot of ammo. And when that car was stopped, it had a small arsenal on it, I guarantee you.
Oh
And
yeah.
his preferred weapon was a BAR,
Hmm.
Browning automatic rifle, and that would do some damage, I promise you.
Yeah.
So the police in the Midwest, all law enforcement, whether you were sheriff, county, municipal, whatever, you were outgunned and you were outrun by Clyde Barrow.
Hmm.
And I think this kid found something he could do, something he could do well, flip the switch on knowing how he was going to be able to live his life once that hard left happened on his journey. Um, he didn't see a way back from it, and he
Hmm.
knew that he wasn't going to be taken alive. So as this story unpeels, I'm going to point out a couple of these things. And again, it's not because I think what he did was right or what she did was right or anything like that. I'm just telling you, like, the facts that I found out on this, multiple different places and a lot of different sources, to try to pull back what happened to these kids, what went wrong, where was that hard left, and have you ever been at that crossroads? Can you look back in your lifetime and see when you were standing at that crossroads and you could have took that hard left, or maybe you realized you took a hard left and you were able to back up out of it? I told my son the other day, I said, I've taken so many hard lefts, I just learned to take two more to get my ass right again. You know, you just keep taking hard lefts so you get yourself back to where you were before it all went wrong. And sometimes you can't do that. If you go too far, there ain't no turning back. And there was no turning back for Clyde Barrow at a very, very young age. And it's a sad story. It's a story about two kids that kind of hung on to each other. A young girl that didn't know what else to do, and she certainly wasn't innocent, but she didn't do a lot of the things that people said she did. And I think it's a shame that she went out and people keep lying about her. Just tell the truth. The truth is bad enough. Just tell the truth. You don't no need to add to it. And kind of that's how I feel going into this, Donnie. Anything you want to say before we get started here? I got a couple little videos we're going to share. We're going to talk about them and some stuff I put
Okay. Yeah. There's one thing I'd like to say.
ahead.
So people had a very different attitude towards banks back then. Well, not that different if you think about it. Because of the
Right.
Great Depression, right? The banks were kind of the symbol of the thing
Foreclosing.
that was causing people to be
Yeah.
destitute. You know,
If it was bank
foreclosures, mortgages, loans.
or the lawman.
So when you had these famous figures that come out in public, like Dillinger and Bonnie and Clyde, who are known as these people who rob banks, the people are kind of on the side of the bank robbers because they're like, yeah, screw the banks, man. They're the reason why we're poor. That's why they were kind of like known as like anti-heroes, or
Hmm.
I think Dillinger was kind of seen as like a Robin Hood figure almost, right? Because they're stealing from the rich, and in some cases they talked about how they actually gave back to the poor, you know.
Well, this is true. Now, this is what happens when there's a lot of poor families around and they're doing stuff like buying a truck for somebody who's going to let them stay there every once in a while and hide them in the back, keep their mouth shut so
Yeah.
that person can go to work. They bought him a truck, bought another person that, moved some other people into a house. Clyde Barrow started out with his daddy. His daddy did a couple of little trade things here and there, try to get by. Had a large family. Wound up moving him into Cement City, which was nothing more than a ramshackle kind of Hoover, um, homeless, you know, shack place, with mud in the ground. There was one well, a bunch of different families, nothing more than the tenements we were talking about last week in London, you
Yeah.
know? I mean, it was not much better. And the first couple months they were there, they had to sleep under their cabin until they
Mm.
could afford to buy a tent. This is what this kid grew up in. And you got to wonder, is it the perfect storm? Is it the poverty and the destitute, the hopelessness, and everything else? Did the kid even
And,
try?
and
Dirt
also,
poor, yeah. you
also,
know
be, sorry, also because of the depression and because a lot of this technology is also very new, right?
uh,
Cars being a regular thing is fairly new.
yeah,
A lot of these guns were pretty new, right? So, like, a lot of the infrastructure wasn't there. So, when you talk about the police and their response and
right.
why they
These
were
are
so
dirt.
outgunned, is because
Yeah,
they were still figuring out, the police were still figuring out
right.
cars, right?
There's no communication between the two. There's no car radios, not in these
No,
towns, not in the
no.
Midwest. There might have been in the big cities,
This
just
was in the
starting with the
30s, people.
starting. Remember, the
Yeah.
FBI is just getting started. Hoover's just getting started with all this organized crime and dealing with crap going on in Chicago at this time and everywhere else.
I
This is
think
the
this was,
Midwest. This is hundreds and hundreds of miles in between nowhere. And I'll tell you, that kid could drive. He
yeah.
I he didn't
He-
stop. This wasn't them going from one, fancy motel to another, living it up, gambling and playing poker and spending money and lavishing themselves in all kind of, you know, jewelry and things like that. They bought nice clothes and they rode and they rode and they rode the dusty roads in the cold and the rain and everything else. And Clyde would put that flatten that damn pedal down, and he'd do 80 mile an hour going down these dirt roads. All these roads are unpaved. He'd cut through a field. I mean, this kid could ride. They said if he was born at a different time, he could have been a champion NASCAR driver the way he drove. He found something he could do, you know. And they didn't pull over. They lived in that damn car. And later on, her sister-in-law, who was, well, they weren't married. Uh, Clyde's sister-in-law, Blanche Barrow, who is portrayed in the movie in a 1967 version of Bonnie and Clyde, played by I think Faye Dunaway and Warren Beatty. And she was portrayed in there as like the screaming Mimi when she got shot, and the screaming and stuff that she did. And she really wasn't like that. Blanche was married to Buck, the older brother of Clyde, and they traveled with him during the second year, during the last part of their run, if you want to call it. And that's true, Steve. A lot of NASCAR drivers had been bootleggers and moonshiners, exactly. And I mean, he could have got there if if it wasn't for the killing. That's where they lost it. So so anyway, they had a trip of a start, and I've got a couple pieces here, 10 minute, another 10 minute. There's a little documentary on them I'm going to share with you, and then we'll talk about it. And I think it peels away nicely. And as we go along, I'm going to reiterate a couple of things that I found out that may be factual and maybe not. But I can tell you, as I started talking about the movies, I didn't find one that is factual. That one with the 1967 version that was so everybody loved so much. They've got Faye Dunaway all dressed up the way she was, and sporting a Tommy gun. Well, first of all, they didn't use Tommy guns. Tommy guns jammed. Clyde didn't like them. I wouldn't like them either. They looked real good, but those 40 round circular magazines, those suckers jammed, and you didn't need stuff to be jamming out there. I can speak from experience. When I was in basic training, I had to qualify my weapon, and the damn M16 they gave me jammed every third round. Every third round, I had to pull maintenance on that weapon, and I still qualified as a sharpshooter. Then when I went back in, I got a different weapon. I was able to qualify again, and I was able to do better. But you don't want a weapon that jams, and Clyde didn't either. And every movie they've got them in, they've got Tommy guns with the round magazines. Not true. Little things like that. That's for the movies. The way they had things lined up, the way they met, the way things went down, didn't happen. This is a much more devastatingly horrible story than it was ever portrayed in the movie. The one that almost got it right was The Highwaymen, and I just recently watched that twice. I listened to a couple of interviews from an author who is what's known right now as the living expert on Bonnie and Clyde. Talked to many of the survivors, many one-on-one interviews with surviving family members and people who were involved, victims' families, the whole shebang. And this guy really lays it out real and comes up with an awful lot of things that I think are very interesting. But he said something that was so profound, and I've said it myself before. Why do they have to lie and just not tell the story the way it happened? Because the truth is so much more interesting. It's so much more, um, educational. Because, if you're going to tell a young kid, recognize what it looks like coming up to a crossroad like this. Recognize how fast things can go downhill fast, and try to keep yourself from going down these ways, and also try to keep others, because society had a lot to do with what happened to these kids. And I think we can learn something from it. Donnie, you ready?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Here we go.
I'll be right back, folks.
Hey, Jamie. There for the grace of God, Ted. These are a couple of that they left behind. Look at the size of that belt. Was that about 8 inches around? It was a tiny little thing, about 90 pounds. Clyde Barrow's shirt he was wearing is inside the damn prison. Clyde was for 2 years. Could be AJK. Could be. It's your wanted poster. I'll tell you a little story about that picture too. Started in 1930. All done by 1934. There it is. Can you imagine riding in that car on those dirt rut roads with all that dust, no heat, going about 80 miles an hour. You're sleeping in there, you're eating in there, every once in a while pulling over, take a bath in a creek. Stories in that car. Many cars. That's just the one they wound up in. Clyde Barrow stole that and had it for about 2 weeks. Stole it. It was brand new. Had less than 100 miles on it. Later, they were ambushed. 170 bullets went through that car. But the rest lost in that car. All right. I'm going to take that part down and share that one with you here in a little bit. But I'll tell you a little bit about that car. When he stole it, it had less than 100 miles on it. 2 weeks later, when they were shot to death in Louisiana, it had over 7,500 miles on it. That Clyde Barrow drove that car. Every single car he stole or the gang had, he would drive it to the ground, steal another one, and go next. They'd move everything over to that car and head it on again. They stopped very few times in little hideaway spots that they had tucked away, family members or friends. And a couple of times they rented a little place for about 3 or 4 days, and then they had to go again. When one of the gang members was asked later on, he said, "How many scouts were you in?" Yeah, yep, exactly. That's coast to coast twice. That's how they drove. One big circle. Kept going around all the Midwest, bang, bang, bang. They do it again, and do it again, and that's how he got caught. Because when Frank Hamer got an old retired Texas Ranger got involved, he started doing the thinking, and that was something that hadn't been going on. They had the FBI was working on it, had a dragnet of 1,000 men, couldn't catch him. Frank Hamer caught him in just a couple months. So that's all coming up, folks. I wanted to show you a little bit of that museum and a little bit of their uh, items, their personal items, to kind of give a little bit of humanity back to them because we just know them as names. But these were people, these were young kids, and they did some real killing. They killed upwards of 12 people, nine of them law enforcement officers. And
I believe it was
but
13.
it could have been,
Yeah, I
it could have,
believe it was. That's what I
because
heard, at least.
it also goes back and forth because they got a lot pinned on them that they didn't do. Because anything that was it was so easy. A bank got robbed. Oh, Bonnie and Clyde did it. Somebody got shot. Bonnie and Clyde did it. A lot of that was going on, and I know that's an easy thing to say. Where you know, but there's so many that can be proven where they were actually in a whole nother state and something happened over here and they didn't have anything to do with it. So everybody was really, really throwing a lot down on them. And it started early. It started with Clyde. It started early. I mean, this kid was pinched for stealing turkeys, and he got a rented car and didn't turn it in on time. Now I don't know how long he had it over the time, but that's what got him pinched, and that's what got him thrown into prison the first time.
Oh, can I add something real quick? Real
Sure.
quick. I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just noticed the
Okay, go
chat.
ahead.
People were kind of surprised at the body count of Bonnie and Clyde, and I just got to add that Bonnie's body count was 0. She didn't
Zero.
kill anybody. Zero.
Nope.
Yeah, that
That's
was just
absolutely
like the
true,
gang
Donnie.
itself.
That's true.
But they
Yeah.
said, according to an account, they said, "Oh, I've never seen Bonnie fire a gun, but she's really good at reloading them."
Yeah. Yep.
Yeah, like
It's true.
she'd be next to Clyde, and then
Reloading.
she'd
Yeah.
reload real quick and give it back to him, and then he'd be the one firing the shot. So
She didn't
Bonnie's
do it.
body count
She
is
would
zero.
be there. She would be
Yeah,
there. She had a gun and she had a sawed off rifle and you know, able to, get it around the car and stuff like that. You'll show there'll be a police officer in one of these films that shows you, well, this is the one that Bonnie had and was able to move around and stuff like that. That's not really true. They had plenty of people in the back. There's usually three people in the back, three guys in the back. They did a lot of shooting. And
hmm
you're going to hear as we go through this, now she's culpable because she was there. She knew
hold on,
about it.
Ian.
Not without guilt.
Ian, real
You know
quick.
what I mean? Go ahead.
There was one account in the papers of a story of Bonnie shooting like
Didn't,
a
Ian.
deputy in the head, and she was like making some comment about, "Oh, look at how it bounced," and
Yeah, it's
then
not
laughing
true. But
about it.
we're getting
That later on, the guy who
getting ahead
actually
of it,
gave that
Donnie.
story. Hold on.
Yes,
The guy who actually gave that story to the newspaper later on, like years later, recounted it because he said he confessed that he just wanted the publicity,
that's
and the
true.
newspapers just ran
He
with it.
changed his story 5 different times, and I'm going
According,
to tell that in this film, and I'm going to tell you who did it, and I'm going to tell you why. But we're getting ahead of ourselves, so let's start with the thing
yeah,
here, and just kind of hang with me. You know, yeah, oh yeah, many petty crimes, absolutely, absolutely, not without guilt. I'm not saying
yeah,
that. We can't get all excited because the thing is this. It's been portrayed in the movies like that. It was
yeah.
portrayed in the Highwaymen story that way, and I'm going to explain why it was explained that way that she did it, and why the people that pushed this narrative, why they did it. But I think it's important to know who did what. You see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
So here we go. I'm going to go ahead and play this one, and that story is going to unpeel itself, and I've got pictures I can show you and everything else. But here we go. Let's see where it all started. I want you guys to take a look at this. If you saw how they changed in just 2 years, pick up on that. Look at that little face of Clyde's. Look at this. Look at this again. Right about here. Look at her face. And as they changed on the way through.
way to get in touch with Mrs. Hamer. I saw the movie Bonnie and Clyde. I must admit it was very good acting. Saturday, the 2nd of March, Mother took me down to the Star-Telegram, and I saw the pictures of the real Bonnie and Clyde and read about all their cronies. When I saw the movie and the part where Captain Hamer spit on Bonnie, I felt I hated him. But when I read about all the people they killed and in cold blood, I felt differently towards Captain Hamer. My friends think the captain was so cold-hearted to kill Bonnie and Clyde because they were so much in love. I tell you, if Captain Hamer were alive, I would congratulate him on his actions. And since he is not, I must congratulate his wife instead.
Clyde Barrow was an absolute paranoid. And Bonnie Parker, if anything, was worse. They reveled in their killing. Clyde would, some of our interviews showed, if he saw someone walking down the street that even with his back turned, that looked suspicious, he'd grab for his gun and say, "That man's after me." If you can say that human beings can be animals, they were as close as you can come to it. The mythology that is grown up about them, I'm sure, can never be squelched, but the truth of the matter is that they didn't deserve it.
I saw the picture just so that I could know what it was about, and they just glorified crime and everything that they had done, made the young people think that it was just right to kill, that it was just all right. But they were real bandits, and they would kill you just with the blinking of an eye without even thinking. They were just terrible characters, both of them were.
And this delicate little thing here belonged to Bonnie Parker. It was tailored for Bonnie Parker. It was designed for her. Short stop, easy to handle in a car, flip around in a hurry, out the window this way or this way, 20 gauge, semi-automatic Remington shotgun. There's not any question of what this gun here has killed some people, because the morning they killed the 2 highway patrolmen at Grapevine, the first shots were fired with this gun. And this was in her lap the morning they were killed in Louisiana. As a matter of fact, when the officers raised up and told them to throw up their hands, were peace officers, this gun came up over the windowsill, and that's what triggered the shooting.
In 1934, this was called a farm to Market Road. It's in Louisiana, near the little town of Gippsland. This area has changed little in 30-odd years. The taller pines were cut, but others have thrust their branches up to replace them. Here ended the last mile for public enemies Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. There had been many deadly detours before this spring morning. Joplin, Texarkana, Logansport, Wichita Falls, cold-blooded murder in Grapevine, Hillsboro, Atoka, Oklahoma, bank robberies leaving behind murdered and maimed witnesses. For Captain Hamer, one of the nation's most famous lawmen, it meant the end of months of dogged tracking. Contrary to consequent newspaper and dramatized accounts, Hamer never saw Clyde or Bonnie until the moment he demanded their surrender.
And this gun belonged to my father. He had it, or ordered it special. It isn't a specially built gun because they made these guns for law enforcement officers at the Peace Officer Equipment Company in St. Joseph, Missouri. The only difference in this and a standard 35 Remington is that this 20-shot clip, it took off the old 5-shot clip, put on the 20-shot clip for law enforcement officers, because if they were engaged in a long pursuit in automobile, it was difficult to change clips and etc. So they equipped this gun with a 20-shot clip. And he got this gun for one purpose and one purpose only, and that was when he got on the trail of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker.
Nobody knew them better. Relentless, methodical, he searched their deserted hideouts for every fragment of information, better to know their habits. No clue was too small for his study. He talked with anyone who had seen or had spoken to them. He knew their brands of whiskey and cigarettes. From their camps in target practice, he knew their guns and their ability to use them. Like the Barrow gang, he drove a Ford V8, and like Clyde and Bonnie, lived in the car most of the time. I wanted to know what they were thinking.
He began by doing detective work. He knew that in order to catch criminals as elusive and as cold-blooded as Bonnie and Clyde, that he had to learn just what they were made up of.
Well, naturally, I was just worried to death about him all the time, but I knew he was going to do it because that was his life and his what he had, he just was hired to do that. And I was scared to death about him, but he always said he'd be all right. There wasn't anything happen to him. He'd be all right for me not to worry. But that's just useless to say things like that because a wife does worry if she cares anything about her husband.
What was the climate of the times that spawned Clyde and Bonnie? America in the early 30s was a hungry America. The stock market crash of 1929 had left millions stunned and jobless. Prolonged drought worked its havoc, and in an attempt to produce more grain for bread, the plows that broke the plain left a bowl of dust hundreds of miles wide. A depressed economy closed banks, sent many to bread lines. Government-sponsored work projects.
This was a bad times for the United States. They were in the middle of the Depression. There were lots of poor folks, lots of uneducated people that had to work and instead of getting an education. And it was a time when law officers were well, in our time they called them the fuzz, and in those days they called them the laws. Just like we've got our people who disrespect the law, there were a lot of people back in those times who did also. But they weren't like Bonnie and Clyde.
To begin with, they expected something for nothing, and we can't get anywhere with that in life. We've got to work for what we get or inherit what we get some way or another, and they tried to steal, and that's a principle, of course, that we try to instill in all young people, pays off. And to the value of a human life is important, and to them, a life didn't mean anything. They had just seen kill as to talk to you. Honor comes first, If you're hungry, most people will help you, as they did here. I was working for the public here, and there were many people that were helped, that they didn't rob banks and they didn't cheat and do things of that kind.
With the Depression in full swing and Prohibition just behind, the United States was having its worst crime wave. It was an era of notorious individual criminals in the United States: Capone, Pretty Boy Floyd, Machine Gun Kelly, John Dillinger, and Clyde and Bonnie. Clyde Champion Barrow was born March 24th, 1909 at
Just want to jump in here and tell you that's the first real lie. His name wasn't Clyde Champion Barrow. It was Clyde Chestnut Barrow. He changed it when he went into prison because he thought it'd be a good idea. And even on Wikipedia, it says champion. So you have to really dig, but that's one of them. It's a little one, but it tells you how he was starting to change his thinking. This picture right here, he's 17 years old. 17. So for those of you out there listening and following and tracking what I'm putting down here, this is where it starts to go. And the kid stole turkeys. And ask yourself why he and his siblings would be out there stealing turkeys in Cement City in West Dallas Think about it.
Texas, the son of an impoverished sharecropper trying to feed 8 children on field hand wages. He went to school off and on, through 5 grades, then quit to join a gang of car thieves and small-time robbers. Bonnie Parker was born in Rowena, Texas on October 1st, 1910. She was an A student, finished high school. She met Clyde in January of 1930, and they fell in love instantly. A friend of the 2 lovers described them thusly. He was a little man. What he liked about Bonnie was that her Lilliputian dimensions made Barrow, to himself, seem big and strong. For Bonnie Parker was a mite of a thing, 4 feet 10 inches tall, 85 pounds light, and with a tattoo on the inside of her thigh, commemorating her marriage to a man serving a life sentence in prison.
Okay, stop there real quick. These were tiny little people. And in The Highwaymen, there is a scene, if you've seen this movie, it's very well done. Woody Harrelson and, what's his face? Chat, help me out. You know who I'm talking about. I could see him. I know his name as well as my own, but you know how terrible I am with names. Anytime if you're new here to this channel, anytime that I start trying to name people, I have to just talk around them until the chat comes up with a name, because I get this like blank spot in my head. I don't even know why I try. It happens every time. But anyway, it's a good movie. But there are plenty of scenes in that movie that never happened, not historically accurate in some cases, but better than the 1967 Bonnie and Clyde version that we're talking about here. Those are the 2 major movies, which is weird. There should be another
Kevin
one that they
Costner
did. Thank
was
you,
another guy.
Kevin
Thank you,
Costner.
Glenn.
Thank you, Glenn.
Credit goes to
So
Glenn.
there's a scene in there where they go into the house of the family of one of the guys in the gang, Henry Mifflin, who is going to play a very strong part in this. You will know his name by the end of this episode, Henry Mifflin. So they go to his house in Louisiana, and this is a scene where the 2 retired Rangers, Frank Hammer and Manny Galt, go in and look through this room that Bonnie and Clyde sometimes stay in. Some of their personal items are there, their clothes, her hairbrush, a mirror that looks much like the one you saw in the museum, and they're peeling back some of their personal items, and they're becoming more human and more people to them, although they're keeping in the front of their mind that these people have killed law enforcement officers and innocent civilians. And that's first and foremost in their mind. But they can't help but the human aspect of everything is creeping in at the same time. And they look at their clothes and they lay them on the bed, and it looks like children's clothes. These people were so small. And you wonder how they have such a big, you know what I'm saying? Yeah, they are profiling AJK, but the scene meant a little bit more, and it was a completely made up scene because no law enforcement went into those hideouts where Clyde didn't hear about it. Trust me, he would have known if they had gone there. That's why Frank Hammer didn't go near any of those places. They did something that was very backdoor to get to Bonnie and Clyde, and Frank Hammer handled it very well as a law enforcement officer that he was. He knew what he was doing. And the story is more magnificent, I think, than the one they've been feeding you since 1934. And that's why I'm trying to give it to you tonight. And you can go check all of this stuff out yourself if you're interested in it, and really go back and look. But don't go by the movies that they're showing you, because it's not quite, a lot of it is, but some of the important stuff isn't. And I think it's important to know the truth. I mean, also when you're looking at Clyde, that when he was 17, you're looking at, Blue, something that might interest you as well, is you're looking at an organic breakdown. It's really one of those studies on an individual that it was just his surroundings, just his makeup, the people that he was with, the times, the circumstances, the effects of the outside back and forth, how he reacted to it, and the consequences of those actions that molded this criminal so quickly, because he was strictly against drugs, strictly against, didn't even like drinking coffee, did not drink coffee, and the only time he drank, yeah, um, but why? And when did it happen? Because I think it's important to understand, looking at the end result, it's also important to see how that result started. It really does help to understand, for future stuff, to help people to, see it on your own, or just to an interesting concept. But he is completely organic with him. Bonnie at one point in time gets very badly injured. Well, they do throughout this crime spree. But at one point in time, her leg gets badly burned with battery acid from a car accident, as well as fire, down to the bone. And she gets addicted to the laudanum and the painkillers that they're stealing. They used to follow doctors home and then steal their car, leave the car, but take the bag. They had so many different medical things and stuff. It's interesting how they got through and what they did to survive. But she got addicted to painkillers. He made her go cold turkey. He wasn't having it. He was strictly against it. So we're not having the MK Ultra pharmaceutical since, kindergarten, vaccinated, twisted, frequency kids that grow up and do these crazy things. We've got an organic kind of situation here. I think it's very interesting. So, but anyway, yeah, his name is Chestnut. We know now, Clyde. So it's okay, man. It's okay. You got to the facts. Like facts are strange things. Like just like John Adams.
She had a hard, angular little face and looked older than her years. She read magazines of romantic confessions, painted her toenails pink, and upset color-conscious people by trying to match her dyed red hair with red hats, dresses, and shoes. It was said she had a loud mouth, unquote. A month after meeting Bonnie, Clyde was jailed for one of his numerous petty crimes. And 1 month after that, Bonnie smuggled a pistol into his cell so that he was able to break out of jail. He was captured a few days later and sent to the Texas State Penitentiary in Huntsville. Clyde stayed in prison for nearly 2 years. The hard labor of the field gang that left the walls daily to toil in the river bottoms didn't sit well with the frustrated Clyde. In a moment of despondency, he asked another convict to chop off 2 of his toes with an axe so that he would be taken within the walls and released from drudgery in the fields. Then, irony of ironies, this revolting incident had just occurred when Clyde's pardon was obtained February 2nd, 1932. He returned to Bonnie on crutches. This date is significant, for now the violent deeds of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker escalated at a furious pace, from robbing grocery stores, filling stations, and the small banks to wanton and sadistic murder. Clyde's first nationally publicized crime was committed without Bonnie. Bonnie was in jail in Kaufman, Texas, having been caught in a robbery, while Clyde had managed to get away. However, there was a female with Clyde that spring evening.
Now this'll be easy money. You stay in the car and cover me. Hey, open up, old man.
The caller persuaded the elderly grocer to come downstairs and open his front door.
Give us some gas.
and your money.
Mrs. Boucher fainted at the death of her husband, and when she revived, the widow identified Clyde Barrow's picture.
Well, there we go.
There we go.
So I want to tell
Ted.
you, that's the trip. Yeah, Ted.
Nice, Ted.
That's funny.
Yeah.
So the little bitty things, this is what I'm saying, okay? And here we are. We've got it started. Um, don't know much about that first one. I can't really comment on it. I don't know the backstory on the first robbery, but I can tell you this: what I've learned along the way. And Ian, a lot of that I absolutely agree with. She was in getting into trouble, but she also, like I said, she was a young kid. And again, I'm not talking for her. I'm just trying to be, I guess, devil's advocate here and look at that side of it too, because I think it's an interesting conversation to see how people are so multifaceted, just like we are. You know, you can tell me that she pointed out, people to get, for friends to mug, or people that might have been carrying a lot of dough, or stuff like that. There's talk about that she might have dabbled into prostitution because she showed up with a little extra money. People couldn't figure out where she got it, so they said that she was into prostitution. We don't know that. Um, you know, uh, my thing is this: I don't mind when people say I did something. I did. I can kind of fun size. That's funny, cats. Uh, I don't mind being that. I have a thing about being accused of stuff I didn't do. Ask me, I'll tell you the truth.
Oh, Ted just
And
hit a zinger on us.
who did?
Cisco. Ted. He says gatekeepers can't reach the bloody keyhole. Oh, Ted, you rascal.
You rascal. You rascal. I'll tell you what, don't let Ted fool you. He's incognito. He says things like that just to throw you off, that he is the fastest wrench, between him and Aunt Edna. I don't know who's going to whack you first. So they're going to bake you some cupcakes. And if you're new in here, if there's a troll that pops in, or some of these porn bots and people like that, they bake some shut the fuck up cakes so quick. These are black ops mods, with the wrench, and they keep it nice and clean here. It's really cool. So anyway, so yeah, so the lies start early, right? And again, with her, like, she shows up with a little extra money, said, well, she might, to somebody in the diner, she was a waitress, she was married. I think she was 16 out of school. She got straight A's. She was in all the plays. She was in drama. And again, trying to humanize the person, but what they were human. What makes a person turn to do these things? What would make you think that whatever the hell you had going on at home, right? That riding around in a car in these rough rides, I don't care how pretty it was on the outside, because they're beautiful cars, but it wasn't a smooth ride. And it certainly didn't have the amenities that we have now. And the roads weren't like they are now. And you're riding down the road. That's what they did. They took baths in creeks. They would camp out on the side of a lake. you know that there's witnesses that saw them in hideouts, or brought them food or whatever. They're covered in mosquito bites and bug bites, and things like this. And that's the thing, that now Clyde developed this taste, and you can see through the succession of pictures I'm showing you, that the first one of his first little mugshot at 17, he had 2 years for turkeys and not turning a rental car in, on time. And I've looked up and tried to look at Dig and Dig. How long did he have this rental car?
Mm-hmm.
This is important, guys. This 17-year-old kid gets sent to Easton freaking Farm for 2 years. Could be any one of you. Who said it earlier? For the grace of God. if not you, your grandchild, your child, your neighbor, whatever. The way people turn that hard left, that crossroads, that choice. Where the hell is that makes it go? This is what interests me. And this little kid goes to Eastman prison. Now,
Yeah.
Donnie, I
Yeah.
gave you that.
Hmm.
Tell me a little bit about that off the top of your head. What you were able to
Well,
pull on
it was originally land that was cleared out by slaves, um, and then it got turned into a prison where they basically just, after they got rid of slaves, they just used prison labor, which is essentially the same thing. And it was primarily used for growing cotton and a lot of agricultural. To this day, it's still being used as farmland and as an agricultural output center. And
notorious for being a scumbag place, torturing
Texas is
prisoners.
notorious amongst other states for having tougher prisons. And of all the prisons in Texas, Eastern State Farm is like the toughest of the Texas prisons,
Top of the
That's
heap,
like where
man.
you don't want to go.
They
Like you
would
do
run
not want to
prisoners
go there.
over with the horses,
Yeah.
beat them with baseball bats. Their trustees were in charge, and the trustees, of course, were prisoners, and they could pretty much do what they wanted with the other prisoners.
Yeah, that's
This
the
is the
thing.
Clyde
It's
Barrow.
the
It's 17.
prisoners who are the guards. That's crazy if you think about it.
This is it. And again, I'm not. Please don't mistake my the sound of my voice or the tone of my voice or the words I choose as I'm arguing with anybody or trying to force a narrative. I'm not trying to do that. If I'm trying to project anything, it's the breaking down of humanity. It's not a new thing. Times were tough. They were unsure. People who had jobs on Monday didn't have them by Monday night. You know, factories shut down, businesses shut down. The shit ran downhill. It ran downhill fast, and it stayed. You know, people were clinging to the outside of cities because cities is the only place you could hope for getting anything. You know, they forgot how to work together. The rug was pulled out from under them. The stock market crashed. Prohibition, crime was off the hizzy. You know, and I mean, look at this outbreak in 34 alone. You got Dillinger, Babyface Nelson, Pretty Boy Floyd. Um, did I say Dillinger? And
Yeah.
Bonnie and Clyde, all and more. Those are just off the top of my head. 34 alone. You know, these people are absolutely products of their atmosphere and and their times and and everything that's going on along. And not very much unlike some of the people we know are facing right now.
Hmm.
Where things are getting tight and unsure and shaky and a little earthquakey, right? So you think about it, and these are people that weren't even, now Clyde, didn't do anything, didn't like drugs, but she drank. There's no question about that. That little girl could put it away. So there's no doubt about that. But there is doubt, and there is some lies and some smoke and mirrors and some other things that have gone along through this. And I personally think the real story is more interesting. And I
Yeah.
want you guys to go back and look at these, if you so choose, the Bonnie and Clyde 1967. You can get it on YouTube. And also the Highwaymen, more recently made, I think in 1920, 2020, somewhere around in there. It's fairly new. And be able to look at it and go, okay, I can see they put this scene in here. This scene is really a composite of several different things that happen because this is what they do in historical things.
Hmm.
In Bonnie and Clyde movie alone, there's like 4 characters that didn't even exist, but are based on characters that did, or they're a composite. There is I don't know how many of you saw the movie that I'm talking about, but there's one this little funny guy that kind of rides with him and they kind of push him and shove him around. He's kind of a little unsure and he's one of these like goofy characters that, was famous back in the 60s. and he's really a composite of like 3 different people, because they were all involved in a little scene, but it wasn't important enough to explain it all in this movie. They were more interested in the cinematography and keeping everything on Bonnie and Clyde. A lot went down in 2 years. So you can also look at that. You can look at scenes, like I said, the Highwaymen, where they're walking around inside of this house and laying Bonnie and Clyde's clothes out on the bed, and go and imagine how small they are. They look like children. And he's looking at it and he's like, this guy, killed 9, high lawmen and like 4 civilians. I mean, imagine what's going through their head. And he's got to stop it. He's the one that's been told to stop it. And he's no fool. This guy and Galt, both of the ex-Rangers, have impeccable, killed multiple people in the line of duty. Both, reeling from that, both in their minds and, in their memory, and throughout their history and their careers, coming out of retirement to catch these 2 little bastards, right?
Mhm.
And they put that scene in there, but they didn't tell you the real story behind it, and the fact that Clyde would have known. That's how tight that town was. That's how tight its people were. But inevitably, the family and the people he was closest to would be his downfall, like many people we know, like Dillinger, like gosh, how many, been turned against Caesar, and how many have we done? Lincoln. You keep naming them. That trusted the wrong people, and the people closest to them did them in. Many, Donnie, right? Off the top of your head.
Mhm. Yeah.
So, again, here we have this story. So, what do we know so far? We know they're 2 young kids. They're growing up in this time. Uh, Something happens. Clyde, starts getting into crime early. He's got a brother that was in prison. A lot of people going to prison back and forth. Bonnie is married at 17, 16, I believe it was. Marries a guy. She gets married to him. I think a couple days after the wedding, he takes off, disappears, gone like a week, comes back, acts like he doesn't have to explain anything and all this other stuff, back and forth fighting. He stays a couple days, gone again, gone 2 weeks, and this keeps going for a couple of months until Bonnie just says, well, that's just it. And it kind of just peters after that. He winds up getting pinched for boosting cars or some kind of mess, and he's sent to prison for killing somebody. So he's in jail with, I believe, a life sentence, or he does something while he's in there to get him one. But dude's gone. So it was a quick little marriage. It didn't quite work out. But because she marries this guy, she married that guy to get out of her situation. Let's just be truthful, you know? And she's meeting a lot of people down there. He was probably exciting. And she's like, she's going to go for one of those Hollywood types that's got a little excitement on him, because that's what she's doing all the time. Looking at those magazines, painting her toenails, trying to be like the Hollywood, right, Donnie? So of course
And
she would
Hollywood
go
was
for.
a new thing too, so you also have to consider like people are kind of
Yep,
out of their minds about it.
big deal, big
Yeah.
deal. And the papers and the magazines, and that was it. And she waitress, the girl worked, and at the same time, she did these other things. We're saying she's also got fired twice for giving away food to people who couldn't afford it, and feeding families out the back door, and giving them food that other people were going to throw away, and lost her job over that. And she put herself through some kind of makeshift cosmetology school, and that's how she got out of there, and told her mama that that's how she got away with Clyde, because she told her mama she had a job in another city, a good job doing cosmetics and this other stuff. She's a pretty girl. She fixed herself up like the Clara Bow, like the it girl back then. But and again, that doesn't excuse anything that they did earlier. And I'm certainly not saying that she never killed anybody, but she certainly didn't do the things they said she did. I can't say that whole time she never shot anybody. Because even if she shot out a window, she could have winged somebody or shot somebody. I don't know. But the few times that they said she did, and they made it prominent, She didn't do it. And I'm going to tell you why. I'm going to tell you why that all went down. So pay attention along the way. Um, little Chestnut has changed his name. But this is a kid, 17 years old, going to the worst prison. Now, Donnie, do you have any statistics on that prison at all? Like how many prisoners died? The the cemetery for the dead prisoners there is vast, I assure you. It
Yeah.
just goes on. It looks like Arlington National Cemetery for the dead prisoners. They didn't care how many they killed.
Yeah, I'm not privy to that information because I do not think the Texas State Department of Corrections wants that statistic out there.
Right? It's kind of like the
Yeah.
missing 411. They're
Yeah.
not going to in the
It's like
national
if you
park.
try to Google it, it's like, oh, Texas, the
Yeah,
state of Texas is like, I don't know.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, trust me, this prison was heinous.
It was
You
heinous.
know,
It was like the worst prison in
yeah.
America.
So here it is. This is what I'm saying. Be kind. A 17-year-old kid going to a place like that prison. How horrific. This is how horrific. Be kind. This kid is repeatedly raped and beaten by one of the trustees that is in charge of his wing. He's taken out and has to work in the fields because of his slight build and because of him being small. Your group has to keep up with the other guards group. And if you don't, you're going to get punished. And if you bring your group down, your whole group's going to be against you. It's kind of like being in the army and, the weak man is getting, picked on, so he'll work harder. But Clyde was having a hard time. 17-year-old kid, you see him. And throughout these videos of this film, I've got pictures and stuff of this guy, but the story is amazing because what he does is after he is broken down by this man and bullied and harassed, this guy is all in his day. This guy, I mean, you could just imagine the head games they played on him and the fear and to have your body repeatedly torn and just demeaned in the way that this guy did to this kid. One of his cellmates said that he saw him walk in a schoolboy and he left a rattlesnake. And you could see that happening in a prison like that. So you wonder, was there any kind of prison reform that comes out of a story like this? Or, I assure you it's still going on today. It's like we don't learn anything. But you gotta put that, if you're going to do a file on Clyde Barrow, you gotta put that in the file because this is where this kid changed. So was his crossroad when he stole the turkey? Why did he steal the turkey? You can only imagine. So was it, where when he started following his older brother? Was it when his older brother started, when he got out, his older brother started to teach him how to hotwire cars? you know. But this kid got out of prison, and what that one lady was saying was, he never tried to do anything uh, right. He just went wrong. And I'm like, no, wait a minute, that's not right. He did try, because when he got out of prison, he found a job, a glass factory. Cops, every time something went wrong in town or close to it, they would come and harass him. He would get harassed. He lost his job. Happened 4 times. Jobs were hard to come by. And finally, he said, screw it. He said, teach me how to hotwire cars. So I'm not saying he was right in the decision. I'm saying it was hard. It was a hard road, and it went wrong with a lot of outside stuff, affecting it. And I think we all look back in our lives and saw when things went, you could kind of see them coming, or they just came at you. And we're still here to talk about it. But somebody said it earlier, there for the grace of God go I. How many times I would have put up with what I would have felt about the law people back then. And everybody's got a hand in it. I can't tell you how the police were in Texas in 1934 and how they handled things and how they went about questioning somebody. I'm sure they went in very quiet and discreetly, and talked to him where it wouldn't affect his day to day, and just asked him a couple polite questions, and and moved on, right?
Mhm.
That's not what happened. There was harassment, and nobody would hire him. And what is he going to do? And I think as a mom, I think, my God, if I had a kid like that, I would hope that they would like take off to the mountains somewhere. You could go off and live in a cabin and not bother anybody. Nobody know where you were. You don't have to pick this. You can get out and change your atmosphere. You'd hope that they think something like that, but he didn't. He went to his older brother, and things started just like that. Like the engine on a V8, 1934 Deluxe with the safety glass. Right, Donnie? Is
Yep.
there anything else you wanted to add to that before we hit the second part? So I just thought I would tell you that because you're going to hear about this thing in the prison that happened to him. And another thing that he comes out with,
Mhm.
Clyde, while he's there, they're working, they're doing a lot of logging and things like that and clearing fields. And while they're out there, he gets another inmate to chop off 2 of his toes and basically cripple him. So he'll get sent out of that prison and get away from these people that are harassing him, doing this stuff to him, and get a different duty, right? And he doesn't know that his mama, in his on his behalf, is going to the governor and pleading for a pardon for him to get her 17-year-old kid out of this hard prison. Go mama bear, I say. I mean, hey, you're fighting for your kids, right? So I mean, you do, right? You just do. So she gets him out. And 6 days after he chops off his toes, or gets a guy to chop off his toes to get out of there, she's already got it in the works, and he's out of there because she fought for him. And yeah, and he goes and tries to get a legit job even with his toes. And the thing that you don't know, here's a little tidbit I'm going to throw at you. He could never drive a car again wearing a shoe on that foot. He had to drive barefoot or stocking feet. So if you don't see a historical prediction of him, a replay, and they say it's real footage, and Clive's got 2 shoes on jumping out of the car, you know it's fake. Because he always had just one shoe until he put it on. So if he's jumping out of the car, he doesn't have a shoe on his driving foot. So just there's a little something for you. All right, here we go, Donnie. Another 10 minutes.
Okay. I'll be in the chat.
Atoka, Oklahoma. Bonnie has been released from the jail and rejoins Clyde. But there is a third member of the gang waiting, Raymond Hamilton, notorious in his own right. Hamilton was one of the succession of men who would, for a time, be a friend to both Bonnie and Clyde, completing the strange and interpersonal triangle called the Barrow Gang. The odd threesome argued constantly, and at a dance in Atoka, Oklahoma, the sheriff and his deputy interrupted one of their quarrels and paid with their lives for their interference. Shortly after this incident, Raymond Hamilton is caught and goes to jail. To escape capture, Clyde and Bonnie travel north and rent a small stone bungalow in South Joplin, Missouri. Here they are joined by Clyde's brother Buck and his wife Blanche. Buck has only recently been released from prison, and as Blanche was to later claim, they had come to Joplin to try and persuade Clyde and Bonnie to settle down. But an all too familiar pattern was to repeat itself. With Clyde Barrow at the wheel, as usual, a fast and good driver, the bandits' car sped down the road toward the wilds of Oklahoma. With their usual good luck, Bonnie and Clyde, Buck and Blanche, had gotten away, leaving death and sorrow behind them. The place was searched. A newspaperman found and developed a roll of film. The pictures, because of their sensational poses, were published throughout the nation, and thousands of copies were circulated and helped greatly in identifying Clyde and Bonnie. Bonnie was labeled as Clyde's cigar-smoking Moll. The madness continued July 1933.
Okay, now there's another one, and I'll tell you why. The amazing thing about this is, again, think about the times, and newspapers were it. They were it. You know, you had your newsreels, maybe. If you were lucky enough to go to the movies, they had one of those little black and white newsreels before and after or during the movie, whenever they played them. You know, and you had your magazines, but newspapers were it. And a lot of the stuff that was going on is they didn't have good pictures of Bonnie and Clyde. All these pictures you're seeing that we pulled up, police officers didn't have that. Okay. That's stuff that's been dug up since then in family albums and things around that time. So about halfway through this, if you notice, this is when his brother Buck gets out of prison. He brings his new wife Blanche along. Basically, they're going to try to talk Clyde in, you know, off the ledge here. And what they were really doing is connecting in. You know, Buck wanted to get back in and see what was going on with his little brother, you know, and see what's going on with the gang and all. But Blanche was something. Now, she was very much like Bonnie. She liked her fashion, and she liked to, you know, be well kept. These girls had their hair kept up. They tried the best they could, you know, and kept up with the times. There was always the magazines and the makeup and the jewelry and clothes. That's all they did, right? And wherever they went, they left them most of the time. You know, you see them scattered all over the place. So that's when they come into the picture toward the end, you know, toward like the second year. And they get pinched, and you're going to hear that story again. But what happens is they finally rent a place because they want to take a bath and they want to get sleep in a real bed. They get a place for a couple of days, and they decide they're going to party. They're playing poker, they're dancing, they're singing and drinking beer, and you know, ordering food. You're going down to the little diner to get 5 chicken dinners or whatever. They're causing people are seeing them and hearing them. So neighbors call the cops on them. The cops think they got some bootleggers on in there because there was so much bootlegging going on. The cops go in, and it doesn't work out well. Again, 2 more law officers are dead, and a couple of the gang members get shot and hurt, and they wind up fleeing. And what they left behind was multiple personal items, because now they're emptying the cars, they're bringing their stuff out, they're organizing things. I know chicken dinner sounds good, doesn't it, Kat? Every time I say that, I think, man, I want a chicken dinner. You know, a little saw on the side, a little biscuit, one of those buns, maybe those yeast buns would be so nice. A little coleslaw, little maybe mashed potatoes and gravy. You know, some good old fried chicken. It crunches when you bite into it. Hell yeah. You know, when you bite into a good fried chicken, and you pull back that first bite and a little steam comes out, you know, man, that's nice, isn't it? Anyhow, sounds good, chicken dinner. So anyway, they called attention to themselves, and it didn't work out well. And again, I'm not glorifying it. I'm saying this is what happened. And they left behind a bunch of personal items. And one of the things they left behind was Blanche loved to take pictures, and she brought a couple of cameras with her. Cameras were big back then. They were really coming in. People had them a lot more than what you'd think. And they left a lot of undeveloped film on there. So the police got the film developed, and what's on there but a bunch of them screwing around. They're all dressed up. They got clean. They got a bath. Went and bought new clothes, and Clyde, because he felt like all he had was his dignity, was trying to, this is him saying it, this is his friend saying it, was to dress well. And he was very fond of his silk shirts and things, and he was going to dress like the gangsters he had heard about in Chicago, and it were, because now this is 34, so you had all the 20s, you had all the stuff coming out of Chicago and New York and all that famous stuff, you know uh, but they really were petty crooks. He wasn't somebody, they didn't want to go and rob banks. He hated robbing banks. He said it made him too hot. He liked to hit little places and boost cars and drive, and he'd go steal what they needed, and he liked to be a big shot and go up and do, like I said, buy a truck for this, one of the fathers of one of the gang members' father, so that he could go work. They could keep their house and keep a little room in the back for them in case they come through and need a place to, sleep for the night. They got a little place, and he had these all over the place. Gas stations, grocery stores, exactly, Ian. And, it's funny because in the movies, when they're talking to some of the townsfolk that are saying, well, they're just hitting banks and, up against the woman, and the people that are talking about them like they're heroes. And what Donnie said in the beginning, holds a lot of water. They were against banks. They were against law people. These people were broke and poor and punched down. I mean, trying to dig it out of, a situation that we can only have nightmares about. You know, the stuff that they would do and the way they live day to day. God, I hope we never know it. You know, so it was different. It was different, but the people, the people were the same. People break the same. People push on the same. Some of us more than others. But can you imagine sleeping with your family of 8 under a wagon for a couple of months so you can afford to buy a tent? This is what Clyde grew up in. Many people have the same story. And like that one lady said, and don't go out and rob banks or rob stores or steal cars. They find another way, you know. But you can't say Clyde didn't try. He didn't go straight to it. And they do try to make that point in Highwaymen when another scene is brought forward where uh, Frank Hammer, uh, the Texas Ranger that is sent basically to go and find to stop Bonnie and Clyde, not find them. There was no ever any go get them to surrender. They knew it was going to be an execution from the word go. Let's just get that straight, you know. And there was a little bit of concern about public outcry and things like this. But at this point in time, after the Eastman prison break, and we'll tell you about that, it was, and the more officers killed and more people being killed. And after that Easter morning thing in Grapevine, that's heartbreaking. That's heartbreaking. The officers were killed there. And that's the one you see all the time where you see Bonnie limping out of the car and taking that sawed off shotgun and kicking and turning that police officer over and shooting him dead in the face. You've seen it in multiple different movies and showings in these little mini series and stuff. That did not happen. The officers died and the people were there, and I'll explain what happened. But the reason I keep pushing that fact is because of this. The people who died deserve the truth to be told too, not be used in some kind of ruse to turn the public's eye or to justify something else. There really needed to be no more justification at this point. There were 9 officers dead and 4 civilians, multiple people victims across, if you want to bring in car theft and robberies and God knows what else. that happen along the way. You know, stolen sheets off of a clothesline. Let's bring it all out. You know, they stole clothes off of clotheslines. You know, and I'm sure a lot of other things along the way. And I'm not trying to justify it. I'm saying let's just tell it like it was, because the cops that died there on that freaking hot pavement in Easter morning deserve the person that they last saw shoot them, that truth to be told, not covered up for some reason or another, not be used as a pawn. You know, the truth is the truth. You don't get to shift it around. Facts are funny things. You know, that's what I'm saying. Okay, I'm sorry. Didn't mean to go off on a rant there, but I did. It happens around here.
Clyde and Bonnie, Buck and his wife Blanche, are holed up in a motel in Platte City, Missouri. They are...
Hold up. I forgot the whole reason I told you this. So the thing is, I'm sorry, guys. It's a night. The reason, the cameras they found, the film. So now they've got pictures. They've got all these pictures the police can send out to the newspapers. Okay. And now they have a face. And one of the pictures, Bonnie is got a leg up. They keep saying an unladylike pose, you know, the times. With that famous picture with the cigar in her mouth and the shotgun. And she also has another one where she's holding a shotgun, you know, Clive's belly. He's kind of laughing, looking at her. It's kind of funny. But anyway, the thing was is she was goofing around. And it was so important for her to get the word out that anytime that you'll hear about how they kidnap people and take them 100 miles away and let them go, give them bus money to go back, because they didn't want to kill everybody. You know, it was only the ones that came at them, you know, again, not justified, but, you know, he wasn't going to be taken alive. And he said as much, and I guess he meant it, you know, he meant what he said. He wasn't going back to a prison like that. And I can understand why. I don't blame him, but he should have found another way in my book. You know what I mean? So anyhow, now they got pictures, but it was so important to her that even every time she saw somebody and they were going to leave, that knew who they were, and they were going to leave back so they could tell the story, she'd tell them, make sure you tell them I don't smoke cigars. It meant a lot to her for people to know and understand her image, you know. And she'd tell them things like, I didn't shoot anybody. You know, I'm just here with Clyde. If he's going to go, I'm going to go where he goes. She didn't have anything else to live for. You know, she made a choice. That was her crossroads. When he was going to go, she went with him, you know. And so it was something. Now they've got all the pictures out, and that only glorifies it more. Now everybody's dressing like her, and it kind of backfired. And now the police are trying to get it back out of, they are not heroes. They are, you know, like that one guy said, he's, you know, like they've turned animal. And, you know, in a lot of ways they had, and it was so quick. It was so quick. That somebody could just get that broken that fast. You know what I mean? So I wanted to tell you that about the pictures, because that find and when they left that camera behind, it changed everything. It changed the entire story of Bonnie and Clyde. It's what made them famous. And the police, that's another reason why the law that was going after them, the small group that starts to form to stop Bonnie and Clyde, have to keep all of that in the forefront of their mind. You know, they're driving around and seeing Go Bonnie and Clyde on water towers. You know what I mean? The public love them, and they can't understand why they think that Robin Hood would shoot a man point blank in the face for $4 and a tank full of gas. And quite frankly, neither can I. So that's what I'm asking. How did we get here?
Arouse suspicion, and police surround the motel. fugitives escape, but Buck is mortally wounded. Several days later, police catch up with him and capture Buck and Blanche. In this remarkable photograph, Buck is dying while his wife, painfully aware that this is the end, is restrained by peace officers. As this picture was being snapped, Bonnie and Clyde were about 200 yards away, escaping through the woods.
What actually got Frank Hamer on the Barrow Parker case was when Clyde and Bonnie raided the prison for him at Huntsville, and 4 or 5 prisoners were allowed to escape as a result of their raid.
During most of this time, Clyde's running mate, Raymond Hamilton, was serving a life sentence at Easton State Farm near Huntsville for murder. Even though Hamilton and Barrow had many fistfights over Bonnie, Clyde and Bonnie planned to help him escape. On the morning of January 16, 1934, guards led the prisoners out into the cotton fields along the Trinity River Valley. One of the convicts slipped unnoticed behind a log where he picked up a .45 caliber pistol. Raymond Hamilton, Henry Methvin, Joe Palmer, H.B. Bybee, and another prisoner backed away from the guards. From the highway nearby, Clyde and Bonnie roared toward them. In a barrage of nearly 100 shots, one of the guards was killed. 5 prisoners escaped. Lee Simmons, head of the Texas prison system, was enraged over the brutal killings and escape of the prisoners. He wrote about it in his book, Assignment Huntsville. I lay awake nights until I had worked out a plan to bring the Clyde Barrow gang to justice. I needed an experienced and dependable man to put on the trail of Clyde and Bonnie and stay on it until they were either captured or put out of business. My decision was for Frank Hamer. If all the criminals in Texas in 1934 were asked to name the man they would most dread to have on their trail, they would all have named Captain Frank Hamer. Hamer has been on the trail of Bonnie and Clyde for 50 days and nights. And then another incident, all too familiar to Hamer, enrages a nation. It is aroused and impatient with so many cold-blooded murders. An elderly farmer, William Schieffer, recovering from a fine Easter dinner, examines his flower beds. The cars drive by in front of his farm, which lies along the highway between the city of Dallas and the town of Grapevine.
Look, his head bounced like a rubber ball.
Fingerprints found on the bottles were those of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. Recalling Bonnie's slaying of the officers in cold blood, Frank Hamer remarked, "She was, begging your pardon, a bit of a female dog," unquote.
The dozen proven murders, there must have been 2 or 3 times that many that they actually killed, but 80% were law officers, and some of the others were killed as bystanders when they were actually after law officers. It wasn't a disrespect for the law, it was an absolute psychotic hatred of the law that these two people had.
April 6th, Miami, Oklahoma. Bonnie and Clyde, accompanied by Henry Methven, get stuck in the mud near Miami, Oklahoma. Cal Campbell, a constable, and Deputy Boyd stopped to assist them.
Well, you folks seem to be needing some help.
We don't need any help from the law. Go!
The wounded man was taken on a wild 14-hour ride before being released.
Well, it's been so long ago.
In 1934,
What happened?
Sophia
I was
Cook
sitting out in the
of Ruston,
swing.
Louisiana, and an acquaintance were taken for a ride they'll never forget.
And waiting to go back to work. And then in a few minutes, Mr. Darby, a man who was boarding there, came out to the front and said that someone had stolen his car, and he wanted to borrow my car to go catch him. We followed him, and finally, we decided that we had to get back to Ruston and go to work. So we turned around, and just as we were fixing to come back to Ruston, this car came going very fast and flagged us, and this man got out, who later proved to be Clyde Barrow, grabbed Mr. Darby by the arm, and he had a pistol. When Clyde got out of the car, he had a pistol in his hand, and he came over to Mr. Darby and hit him at the back of his head, and just he almost was out completely. And then Bonnie grabbed me, and I just kept sitting in the car, and finally Mr. Darby said, "Miss Stone, you better get out of the car. You better get out." Kept telling me that, and so finally it dawned on me that I had better get out of the car. So I got out, and they piled us all in their car on the front seat. She wanted to know if Mr. Darby was my husband, and I told her emphatically no, that we were just friends. And she said, "Well, get in his lap. All 4 of you get on the front seat." Of course, we were just really frightened to death, both of us. I'm sure he was. I know that I was, because she had a pistol in her hand and kept it in my side the whole time that we were with them. And she wanted to know what business that we were in, what I did, and I told her that I was home demonstration agent and that I had been preserving some food over at the high school. And she said, "Oh, how hungry I am. I wish that I had some of that." And I laughingly told her she just take me back to Ruston. I'd give her all the food that she wanted. And though when we first got in the car, the conversation wasn't too friendly. Of course, I was begging to save our life, and I really believe that that is what saved our life, because she said later on in the day that if they hadn't taken a liking to us, that they would have killed us. And when we first got in, they were so mad because we were so close to their stolen car, and they had intended to rob the Ruston State Bank that day, and that was going to be the getaway car. So we upset their plans. And she said that that they were going to kill us both, and said that they were going to tie us, since we weren't man and wife, they were going to tie me to one tree and tie him to another tree, and that they would blow my brains out, and Clyde would blow Mr. Darby's brains out, that they were just going to get rid of us right away, because anybody ought to have had better sense than to follow a car like that. I think one of the things that might be interesting was that when she asked Mr. Darby what he did, he told her that he was an undertaker. And Bonnie laughingly said, well, we know one of these days that we'll get it. And said, but we'll have one last request, and we'll request that you embalm our body. She said, now, won't you get a big kick out of that? And she gave a ha, ha, ha.
I wanted to jump in here because one of the interesting things that I found out about this. Now, this woman, if you watch the movie, 1967 Bonnie and Clyde, there is a scene in there where they kidnap two people, just as she said, hit the one guy in the back of the head, and Gene Wilder plays that part. And there's another, and then there's a woman that plays this lady's part. Now, they changed the names in the movie. This lady talks about it in another interview, that they changed the names. They were still alive, and they interview her later on, a couple years after this, obviously. And they changed their names. But what she's telling you here is true. This is inside the car, Bonnie and Clyde now. She was held captive and rode around with them for, oh gosh, I don't know how many miles. And spent some time with them. They ate burgers. And they talked. And you hear a couple of different stories about what she just said. Sometimes you hear it was Clyde. Sometimes you hear it was Bonnie that found out that the guy, they were talking about what they did for a living. And she told him, I forget exactly what she did. She was a home demonstration, something or other person. And Gene Wilder, the part that Gene Wilder played, he was an undertaker. And they joked in the car about, well, and it was Bonnie who said, wouldn't it be funny if you wound up embalming us or something like that, or whatever this lady just said. And Clyde then says something, he gets upset by it because he kind of knows, that's coming. It's coming. There's no end to this. He's gonna die, in a hail of bullets. He knows it. And it's a matter of time. And he's coming to grips with it. And it was something else that Clyde said to the man. He said something about, it would be funny if you wound up doing it. And it's so profound because here's the kicker. The guy is at the autopsy. He is present at the autopsy of Bonnie and Clyde, the one that was in the car. And they had joked about it before. So, facts are funny.
And later, as it happened, we both were over there to identify the bodies, and I don't know that Mr. Darby really helped with the embalming, but he was there. He had his finger in the pie enough to know that he was there anyway.
Bonnie, her stamina drained from running, turned to whiskey for strength to go on. From letters to relatives, we learned they knew the end was near. Clyde vowed he would never be taken alive. There are many conflicting versions of the last hours of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. We tell it now in the words of the one man to tell it the way it was, Captain Frank Hamer. The trail always led back to Louisiana. Barrow was hot in Texas and Missouri. He had killed no one in Louisiana. I had valuable sources of information, which every successful officer must have. All criminals who work in groups must have some way of communicating with one another when they get separated. I learned that Clyde had his post office on a side road about 8 miles from Gippsland, Louisiana. The point selected was on a small hill from which Bonnie, in the car, would command a view of the road while Clyde went into the piney woods for his mail. As the net closed, I requested a companion, a friend, who'd served with me for many years. So, by the night of May 22, we had good reason to believe that Clyde and Bonnie would visit their mailbox within a short time. I had made contact with Sheriff Henderson Jordan and his deputy Oakley in Bienville Parish, Louisiana. Bob Alcorn and Ted Hinton from the Sheriff's Department of Dallas were members of a party that would take Barrow and the woman. About midnight, we drove out of Gippsland, hid our cars in the piney woods, and made arrangements to finally capture the bandits. We constructed a blind from pine branches within about 25 feet of the point where the car would stop. The men were spaced at intervals of about 10 feet parallel to the road. We were to take Barrow and the woman alive if we could. With everything ready, we had nothing to do but wait about 7 hours without breakfast or coffee. Waiting is the hardest thing an officer has to do.
He told his men that morning when they were out there in the woods awaiting that they would be back in a little while if everything went right. And he said, now if any of you men, said there might be some of us that'll bite the dust, but said if any of you men want to back out, now's the time to do it. And I'll think nothing about it. Said, I won't think less of you. That's what he said. And said he knew that Manny Galt wouldn't back out. He knew that Manny would stay by him through thick and thin, you know. But he wanted to give them all a chance, and said every one of them, to the man, stayed, said they wouldn't think about leaving.
As daylight came, a few cars passed, and occasionally a logger's truck. It was about 10 minutes after 9 when we heard a humming through the pines that was different from that made by the other motors. A car was coming from the north at high speed, singing like a sewing machine. We heard it when it must have been 3 miles away. When Barrow brought the car to a standstill, he pressed the clutch and slipped into low gear with the engine still idling. And just as we had figured, both he and the woman peered with all their attention toward the stump. I stepped from the bushes and commanded Barrow to surrender. Instead of obeying the order as I had hoped and prayed, they grabbed for their weapons, and all hope for a capture alive perished.
Somewhere along the line, something went wrong in their minds, of course, that made them such outlaws and made them have such a feeling toward the law, because they wanted something for nothing, and that they knew that the officers stood for what was right.
Clyde Barrow was absolute paranoid, and Bonnie was, if anything, worse.
But she told me if I dared move, or if I got out of that car, she'd shoot me in the back and kill me, and for me to stay put.
But when I read about all the people they killed and in cold blood, I felt different towards Captain Hamer.
But that shows his hate just immediately. It didn't matter whether they were after us or what, that they were just officers of the law standing for what was right, and that they were going to just mow them down regardless whether they had done anything or not. Now, those officers weren't doing a thing but doing the duty and looking for us, but they were going to kill them if they had turned around. They were going to just shoot them. He said, we're not going to wait for anything if they come back. We're just going to kill the officers, and that showed their thinking. It was so warped.
Examination proved the car was an arsenal. Although the stolen guns and ammunition from the car were awarded to Hamer by the authorities, both families tried to get the weapons back since they could now be sold for a great deal of money to collectors. I am writing you again as we have never got no answer from the other letter we wrote you. We have been told here by Sheriff Smoot Schmidt that you have in your possession some guns that were in the car at the time you and other officers killed my boy Clyde.
This is true, by the way. They kept everything. Bonnie's ring, everything they found in the car, all the weapons, all their personal belongings, everything. I'm not saying they were wrong in doing so. I just found it funny. And the family would write letters and nothing was returned to them. And they were sold many times and much money was made. But I found that interesting.
This gun is a Browning automatic rifle, BAR. I guess every ex-GI in America knows what this is. This was in the car with Clyde and Bunny, along with another one just like it. They stole this gun from the National Guard Army in Beaumont, Texas. It's a pretty powerful weapon, and I'm sure they used it with some telling effect up at Joplin, Missouri, because the Missouri police up there had an armored car that was dismantled with the gun, and I'm sure it was one of these. No one has ever seen a picture, found a record, or any officer who survived a gunfight with them has ever testified they had a Thompson or the so-called Tommy gun or submachine gun. They never had one. But they did have these weapons here, which can be fired full automatic. But I think the sergeant of the Missouri State Patrol by the name of Kaler said that he was standing behind a pecan tree quite large. He told my father when he was on the case, and said, I thought I was pretty safe. But he said, that little red-headed woman filled my face full of splinters on the other side of that tree with one of those guns, and I'm sure that's what she was using. Now this is a horse of another color. This is a 10-gauge Winchester lever-action shotgun. You don't see too many lever-action shotguns. You don't see too many 10-gauge shotguns. This gun belongs to Clyde Barrow. And this gun was in the car with him the morning he was killed over in Louisiana in 1934. Now I would suspect that probably he used this gun in some of the fights he had with peace officers, getting away from them, probably when they had them in close quarters up in Joplin, Missouri, and other places. Of course, he had it quite a long time. This gun was in the car the morning they were killed in Louisiana. This splotch on the receiver of this gun is the last blood that Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker ever spilled. It's their own.
There you go, guys. The last blood they ever spilled, and it was their own. Well, what do you got to say there, Donnie? There's a couple things we want to pull apart there for you, but what's your first response?
Where should we begin?
Well, the first thing, I don't know. You go ahead.
Well, they keep portraying it like it was just the two of them doing all the crimes, right?
Right. Good point.
They were actually a gang, like
Yeah.
of like 4 or 5. They didn't really point that out much, did they?
Good point. Most of the time, like I said, there was 2-3 guys in the back seat. Most of the time.
Yeah.
Or another car following. And that was rare. Because you go do whatever they were going to do and meet back. You know, they had a lot of that going on. Something that was brought aboard here is how did Clyde get word out? Well, he did a lot of different things. He had a thing worked out, portrayed very well in the movie, very historically accurate in the Highwaymen, was the Coke bottle thing, where they'd throw the soda bottle with a note in it. And the kid would come pick it up in the neighborhood and get the word out, family. They did that kind of thing, and they not only they dropped off the bottles, but part of their gang would. The gang interchanged back and forth. When they got separated, they had a time and a place that they would meet, steal a car, and meet you here. That was the way they did it. So that was one thing. They portrayed what I think is the grapevine um, incident. And Ian, I see you're throwing a lot of details out there, and they're great. Uh, this story is very much like Amityville. It is so splintered and so spider webbed out, and it's 90 years. So now we've got people who have died and left journals and these kind of things. Uh, uh, Other accounts like Blanche, all of her stuff came out, and that's inside the car with Bonnie and Clyde for the last, a powerful several months. They rode with them towards the end there, as portrayed in that video we just saw. That was pretty accurate, the Joplin thing.
Yeah.
But the grapevine where she comes out, they have Bonnie limping out and shooting that guy and saying, "Look, Clyde, his head bounced like a rubber ball." Didn't happen. That comes, as Donnie stated, from the farmer who was shown there crouching behind the bushes. This guy started out further than a football field away where his farm is. Okay, let's get down to facts and accuracy here. He started his story when first interviewed by the cops that he heard 2 shots and then another. Okay, 2 shots and then another. He saw 2 people, possibly, and a car take off. Car had been there most of the day. Now it's Clyde in the car, Hamilton's in the car, and a lot of accounts say Bonnie's in the car. Most of them do not, as things have peeled back over the years, that she was someplace else. Okay, with Blanche or somebody else. I can't remember who. Don't quote me on that part. But anyway, in the car, the one that gets out, this is what the account says went down. Now, you've got to picture this, and it's tough. There's 3 motorcycle cops. They're pulling Sunday duty, holiday duty. It's Easter Day. Grapevine, Texas, I believe. Okay. Um, Texas, Louisiana. I'm going to get that screwed up. Don't quote me on that either. But anyway, Easter morning. There's a new kid. He's 24. He's getting married in 12 days. He took this duty to go with his mentors because he wanted to get extra duty because he's got stuff coming up. He's getting married and they just got a little furnished apartment. And he's all excited about it. He takes this Easter duty because he's trying to propel himself forward in his job. They go by once, they see the car. They go back again on patrol. The first motorcycle cop takes off. These 2 say, we're going to pull over and see what's going on. Maybe they need help. They're broke down. And what happens inside the car is Clyde says, "Man, they're coming up here." Mifflin says, "What do you want to do, boss?" He said, "Let's take them." Mifflin's been drinking half the day. Clyde's sober. Mifflin gets out of the car and mistakenly takes what Clyde says as "take them." They feel that Clyde meant we're going to kidnap them because Clyde liked to do that too. It's like, get them out of here. We'll take them out. We'll take them 100 miles this way, give them bus money to come back. We'll be out of there by the time they can get any help. He tried to do this as much as possible. You've got to know that fact about this kid. He tried sometimes. What was going on in his mind, I can't tell you, but these are facts. Mifflin thinks he means, who is a stone cold killer as well, has killed. He's got at least a foot a height on maybe more on Clyde. He's a big dude. He knew him a little bit in prison, you know, but that's Mifflin. He's just a fighter, and he goes out there and just blows him away. Rolls the guy over, and shoots him, just like they portray Bonnie doing it, and gets back in the car. Now, why? Why do they say Bonnie did it? Two reasons. Those pictures that came out that portrayed her, that they thought was going to turn the public against them and backfired, they want to fix that. You can't deny that was part of this. And I know you think, why would they be thinking of such a thing? Just stop these cop killers. But they do think about these things. And board meetings are made, and offices, and shutters are closed, and decisions are made. And yes, and the board of prisons, definitely. This whole thing, Hammer got involved because the Eastman breakout. Now, why is the Eastman breakout important? One, look what happened to Clyde in there. And he vowed, here it is, folks, according to his friends and those that rode with him and his family that have spoken since, has said he wasn't really driven about the money. This is why they were podunk crooks. This is why Dillinger said to release him. Dillinger was a bank robber. They're putting all this stuff on Bonnie and Clyde, half of which they didn't do. The important stuff, yes, they did. They did grapevine. They're responsible for that. But it wasn't Bonnie. So if it was Mifflin, and it was Mifflin's fingerprint on the bottle and not Bonnie's and Clyde's. There was even a cigar butt found, and they tried to say it was a cigar butt that was probably hers. And they tried to say that she was fond of the short black cigars and had tiny teeth marks and prints on it. They went that far. They had to switch the public narrative. That was a bonus. What they were really after was they had to get that charge off of Mifflin, because yes, Ian, you're right. There was talk between Ivy Mifflin, who is the father of Henry Mifflin, and the borough of prisons, and the small group that is gathering. Now you've got Hammer and Galt. They're on the case. You've got a couple of G-men getting sent in, poking their nose and getting involved. You got the governor's men coming in there and keeping an eye on things, and everybody's involved. But what actually happened was they started working on them because they knew Clyde always went back there. They first found Henry Mifflin's parents living in a tent. They got them quietly a farmhouse. In the Highwaymen, Ivy Mifflin and the actor that portrays him is saying, Clyde bought me this house. I love my house. I don't want my house shot up, when he's talking to the actors that are playing this group of lawmen. It wasn't the house. Clyde bought him the truck because the truck was part of a cover for when Clyde was in town. And believe it or not, Clyde and the Mifflin's family was trying to pull off that Clyde was a lumberjack. And everybody laughed at that because anybody can see that Clyde's not a lumberjack. He's not built like a lumberjack. He doesn't dress like a lumberjack. But this was a running joke. But Clyde had bought that truck and paid for it. In the movie, they portray it as the house. So fact and fiction. Okay? They needed to say it that way. The house looked similar, but it wasn't this big 2-level house. It was, there's pictures of it coming up. So there was definitely
Good night, Lynn.
a deal. Good night, Lynn. Good night, honey. There was definitely a deal made. Now, what was the deal? Henry Mifflin gets pardoned. Okay? Gets let go. Now, why I disagree with something that you said, Ian, forgive me for, playing devil's advocate here, but two people I really trust that have been digging around in this for decades and uncovered this new stuff and pieces snapping together. I'd be remiss if I didn't add this in. Is Hammer actually delivered the note and took it to the judge to get it signed? The agreement that he stood and made with him, that his son would get pardoned for everything he was accused of, and he got that signed. And here's the caveat to that. The reason that they blamed Bonnie and got Mifflin out of that scenario was they didn't want to be held accountable by the public for letting off somebody that had killed two law officers. They actually did that. So they got Mifflin out of that scenario and they blamed Bonnie for Grapevine. And they figured if they blamed Bonnie for Grapevine, it would switch everybody that's dressing like her and dyeing their hair red and wearing her shoes and her little outfits and treating her like a hero would flip and understand what they knew they were going to have to do. There was, again, I disagree with some of you in here that are saying that he gave him a chance. He never stepped in the road. Hammer never stepped in the road. Nobody stepped in the road. Nobody said halt. They stood up. There was two shots. It was one of the young men that was hiding in the bushes. There was two shots. He got nervous. He admitted it later. In his old age, he told the truth. He says, I can't tell you why. I was so nervous. And that's what started it off. And they just unloaded 170 rounds into that car. Now, the fact that Ivy Mifflin was out there and had his tire off, so Clyde would pull over and try to help. It worked. That was all part of the setup. They sat out there for days waiting for that. You'll hear other stories, but that's the actual truth. And there was never any, and Hammer knew it. And that's portrayed fairly well in the movie, I think. You know, you can see it. He knew when he first packed his sandwiches to go, took his bag of sandwiches to get in the car, in his wife's new car. He took his wife's car. That's true too. Laddie. But she was the little lady that was reading the letter from the kid that had seen the movie and thought that she didn't like her husband Hammer, but you know, then she saw what Bonnie had done, and it worked in that case. That young girl, when she saw what Bonnie had done, she realized that you know, what a killer she was, or whatever she said, and she thought different of her husband enough to write and send her a letter on it. So it must have worked in the public's eye. We always think of Bonnie like that, you know, and she was so important for her to say, I don't even smoke cigars, of how we thought about her. You know, it's weird. But it's something to think about, right? So that's also that in the movie, the way they portrayed, they actually had a scene where to portray a little bit of this kidnapping stuff that Clyde and Bonnie would do. A lot of people say that he did it, like I said earlier, he didn't want to kill everybody. He would take them to disorientate them, get them out of there, and then he'd throw them bus money, you know, and then leave, because by then they could get away, and they did that a lot. And but in this case, in the movie, the 1967 version, they made up a whole part where they actually kidnapped Hammer. Never happened. That whole part is completely made up. It's a great scene, but that's what that little girl in the letter was talking about, where he spit on Bonnie and they took him for a ride and they treated him and demoralized him and all that. It never happened. You know, just like the scene in Highwaymen, when Hammer goes to visit the father of Clyde Barrow, and Clyde Barrow's father says, just end it for the family. We know there's only one ending to this. And that's also to portray how Hammer knew. And he had said it to Galt, and Galt said it. And they both wound up working and, you know, being Rangers after that. And something else in the movie, they said that the Rangers were disbanded and everything else. They made a big deal about it with the governor, with Ma Ferguson and everybody. That never happened either. And that's the weird thing about, why do they make historical movies and change everything, Donnie?
That's what Hollywood
Sense
does.
in that.
That's
Yeah,
what they do with every historical movie ever made,
right.
pretty much.
It's so true. It's so true. But even in this little vignette, and yes, that was Burr Lives, and I thought that was really good to watch it and how they put this out there. That was like this is in the, I would say early '70s, if not late '60s. This little
If you
document.
want to see, if you want to see a historical film that they claim is based on a true story, but it's inaccurate as all get out, Braveheart. Look into that story.
Oh
Look
yeah,
into the real
yeah,
story of William Wallace and
yeah.
what
Oh,
actually
don't get me
happened.
started on Braveheart.
And
I
then
got Scottish
Hollywood's
in
like,
me.
oh, Hollywood, you just
Yeah,
making stuff up now, Hollywood? Is this
yeah,
how we doing it?
yeah, yeah, yeah. Don't get me started there. I love me some kilts. So anyhow, so getting all that together, I mean, the movie changed something that much. And that's in our eyes. That vision is in our minds, is actual history. And it's not. So I'm just here trying to tell you the different stuff that happened. So, yeah, he actually carried the note to, himself to get that deal sealed. Now, how did that deal work out for Henry Mifflin? They went to the whole thing to get him out of the grapevine scenario. It was that important. And they made the deal that he would be pardoned on all the charges that he was accused of. Here's the caveat. After they got Bonnie and Clyde, they went and arrested him. Why?
Mhm.
Because he hadn't been accused of the shooting in Oklahoma yet. So he was caught for that, which null and voided everything, all the deal they made anyway. And Henry Mifflin he got set for life. He just skinned out of the electric chair, wound up doing I don't know how many years, got out, ran a bar, well, kind of like a dinette kind of bar thing. Um, there's a couple of pictures of him standing out in front of his place, and got into some trouble out there, wound up dead on crawling across the railroad tracks. Was cut in half, and you'll see a couple of things here on it. So, and also Ivy Mifflin died of mysterious circumstances. Suicide by train, Donnie. What do you think there? What are the possibilities?
That's
I'm
one
gonna
way to
go
do it.
out. Here's
That's one
here's
way to
all the
do it.
ways I can go out and choose to go out. You know what? Train,
Hmm.
train, and I'm gonna crawl, and I'm gonna crawl across the train tracks.
Hmm.
You know, yeah, to do it. Yeah, I don't know. All right, I got another little thing here I wanted to share with you. This was not too long. Um, all the things that we had talked about. Now, where am I getting these from? There's a couple of gentlemen I didn't jot down their names or anything like that. That have, like I said, been studying this for decades, uh, and gone and talked with survivors and put it all together, put like the pieces together after 90 years. You know, compiled all this very much like the Abraham Lincoln stuff. You really got to dig in a lot of different directions to get all this. And I can't say what people said in the cars back and forth. You can only kind of go with things that corroborated, and you figure, man, if that's snapped together, maybe I got to take the rest of what he says with a little more weight. But and trying to figure it out. But there was a whole lot of people in on that deal, and all the people that were in on that deal knew that they were going to flip it on Mifflin anyway. You can't let him get away with it. He shot a cop in Oklahoma, you know. But what else does that mean? That means that Henry Mifflin flipped on the guy that busted him out of the fucking prison. So you know what I mean? You're getting back and forth. Again, we have a Caesar, Donnie. I know I get hot. I mean, I hate that. Oh, Ted. Love you. Oh,
Thank you,
honey.
Ted.
Catnip. Ted, thank you so much, love. Thank you so much, darling. That's so sweet of you. But yeah, and I'm sorry. Maybe I could use some catnip to calm down. Because this gets me hot under the collar when they lie about this stuff, you know? And they thank you, sweetheart. And much love to the babies, too. And, and then they lie about it, and they go through all of this, even one of these things with Burl Lives in it, for Pete's sakes, narrating the thing, is saying that Bonnie's the one that went out there and makes up this story. Listen, like Donnie said, this guy started out about a football field and a half away at his house, messing around in his bushes in his garden, and says that he sees one thing, then changes it and he's up closer. Isn't it true, Donnie? Then he changes
Yeah.
it again and he's closer again. And then he says he made it all up. Oh, how did he put it, Donnie? Made it up for what?
For publicity.
There you go.
Yeah.
Come out and said it. But they're still basing the films they're making and the books they're writing on his testimony in describing how those two young officers died. This is horrific. It's to their memory as well. And I have a little thing here before we leave on the victims because I don't think that they're talked about at all. It's all about this, you know. But there's some shenanigans going on here, and I understand the police officer. I can imagine. I mean, listen, you're talking to the person who told you that I thought Lewis Payne was a good soldier. He showed up to work that day. I don't agree with what he did, but if I was picking somebody for the team in dodgeball, he'd probably be, one of the first ones I'd pick. You want somebody who's going to show up and do what they're going to do, whatever it is you're doing, you know. And but this guy Mifflin flips on, and is that, and you can understand the parents, kind of, anything for your boy. I'm not trying to judge. I'm just trying to tell you this is what they've dug up. So everything that we've heard, in the 67, that's pretty much the lovely movie, but it's very historically inaccurate, period. Down to what they're shooting with. Tell the story. Don't make up that you took this wonderful guy. I mean, in all case in point, this Frank Hammer guy is a distinguished hero dude. He got the job done. He had to do things. He was a soldier too. He showed up to work for decades and kept going with honor. But he wasn't so proud of everything he had to do. But he was one of those man's men. He didn't talk about it. He didn't brag about it. He didn't, his little wife there on the ladies auxiliary and shit, and made him sandwiches. I mean, these are real people. But he got the job done. But that man went in there. If somebody's telling you that he stood in the road, nope, never happened. That they gave him warning. They didn't have time for any of that. They had one guy there that was a spotter that actually went to school with, and that's predicted pretty well in the movie. That's, from what I hear, that's spot on. The fact that they had to go around and try to bribe the local cops to see who was crooked and not. That's true. That they did. They found a couple, went up there to help them get this done. But they went up there in full knowing intention. When they went up there, they were going to go full tilt boogie, and they were going to pull that trigger, and they weren't going to stop pulling that trigger till everything stopped moving. Period. And if anybody tells you anything different, wonder how they're, what's going on there and what their agenda is. Right, Donnie?
Yeah.
I mean, that's pretty much from everybody that was there, pretty much the way they said it. So here's the next thing. We're going to see if we can rip through these and get this all done here. All right, here's the rest of this thing. Now, listen to this guy. This guy's a piece of work. Now, he's going to tell you a little story, but keep in mind, when this was recorded, this is in the 60, around right when the movies come out. That's when it came out. So this is like 67, 68. This little dude is like the Barnum and Bailey, light or something. He's like a carnival barker kind of dude. Steve, you're going to love him. He goes and he's running a little entertainment thing local where the car shows up. Now, what happens to this car? Well, truth be told, it's stripped. All the personal stuff, like I said, all the gun, everything is taken. Nobody knows where it goes till it starts showing up for auctions for mucho money. Okay, so you figure it out, and the family didn't get it. So this guy somehow wanders in, finds out that the car is returned to the people it was originally stolen from. Okay, and it's this little couple out there in Topeka, Kansas, for Pete's sake, you know? What are you going to do with this car now, right? So they don't know what to do with it. So this guy finds out that they've got the car. So he goes and says, let me rent it from you. I'll put it up in my carnival and charge people to come and see it. So they think, why the hell not, right, Donnie?
Mm-hmm.
You know, what am I going to do with a car full of holes? You know, full of blood and holes, period. You know, truly, honest to God, who wants such a thing? So he rents this car. It's a hit. So he just outright, finally, after renting it for a while, he decides he wants to take it all over the, you know, he hit all 48 states, this guy. He's hiring relatives that are still alive, cousin, you know, Aunt Sally, the sister of Bonnie Parker and her husband. They go on the road with him. He even gets Dillinger's father to come out and go on this trail. This is like the Buffalo Bill Trail of the Bonnie and Clyde memorabilia, right? And I'm going to show you some pictures of it. You won't believe it, but just so you know what you're seeing, what's coming up here in a minute. This guy's a piece of work. So he has this big monologue he puts out. So he does this for decades. He drags this thing out, and he interchanges family members and witnesses as he goes along, and it's a really big deal. Finally, towards the end, he's kind of retired, and the car's since been sold to some museum. But he finds it the need to come out and give his impression of the 1967 Bonnie and Clyde movie, and give his thoughts on this. And I thought it was priceless, so I'm going to share it with you all. And you all deserve this tonight. This is so sweet. But just imagine where this is coming from. Are you ready, Donnie?
Yep.
Here we go. I think. Here
when
we go.
Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker
Oh,
would not have traded places with the poorest and the humblest people on earth if they could have had peace and ordinary happiness. They trusted but few people, and even here, as always, that trust was betrayed. You'll find that most all of the gangsters in this terrible era were betrayed by one they considered a friend. This was also true of Jesse James, Cole Younger, John Dillinger, Clyde Barrow, and Bonnie Parker. It will always be true of those who kill and steal and prey upon decent, law-abiding citizens. The story of Bonnie and Clyde is offered to you as a true story of the exciting and hectic experiences of people who were misfits in society. It proves that crime does not pay, and that indeed the wages of sin is death. People who know me and remember my many years on the road with the Clyde Barrow Bonnie Parker death car all want to know, is this a true story of Bonnie and Clyde that is now showing at theaters throughout the United States? To answer this question, I think we should review the motion picture of Bonnie and Clyde. And I will try to point out a few interesting facts that are not told in the motion picture. You remember in the first part of the motion picture a character known as C.W. Moss. This man in real life is Henry Methvin. I would like to take you now back into the life of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. On January the 15th, 1934, Bonnie and Clyde in the wee hours of the morning drove to the Eastham, Texas prison farm. They were here to free two of their friends, Ray Hamilton and Joe Palmer. Bonnie and Clyde's plan of escape was successful. They had to shoot one of the guards at the prison farm. He died on January 15th. The Bloody Bear gang had killed their 9th man. This particular morning during the escape, another man, never connected with the Barrow gang, seeing an opportunity to gain freedom, joined the fleeing prisoners. This made Ray Hamilton, Joe Palmer, Bonnie and Clyde, and the new prisoner joining them was Henry Methvin. Now, Ray Hamilton and Joe Palmer were part of the Barrow gang, and they were betrusted, and they were allowed to go their way. But this new man, Henry Methvin, he knew too much. He knew who fired the shot that had killed the guard. Bonnie and Clyde would never let this man out of their sight. Bonnie and Clyde and Henry Methvin headed north. On April 6, 1934, near Commerce, Oklahoma, a truck driver reported to Constable Cal Camel that some drunks were disturbing people at the edge of the city. Cal Camel went to the village barbershop where he found Chief of Police Percy Boyd. Together, the two officers started out to investigate. As they come upon the scene, the officers saw the machine gun. They knew that they had to face no gang of common drunks. Constable Camel shouted, "Get ready to shoot." The man with the machine gun swung around. Constable Camel raised his revolver. The machine gun opened up. The chief was hit, threw himself on the ground. Constable Camel fell by his side dead. Blood streaming down his face, the chief was forced into the car, a machine gun prodding him in the back. Chief Boyd was kidnapped by Bonnie and Clyde and Henry Methvin. They took him up into the state of Kansas and released him. Now the next we hear of Bonnie and Clyde was Topeka, Kansas. This is where they stole the automobile in which they were killed. Directly after stealing the car in Topeka, Kansas, Henry Methvin said to Bonnie and Clyde, "Why don't we go down in Louisiana? I have a mother and father living down there. We could go in hiding with them." Bonnie and Clyde thought this over and thought it would be a very good idea. Not far from Arcadia, Louisiana, back in the woods, is where Bonnie and Clyde lived the last few weeks of their life. Here lived the father and mother of Henry Methvin. It was always understood between Bonnie and Clyde and Henry Methvin, if they were ever separated, they would always steal a car and return back to the house the next morning at 9 a.m. One day, Henry Methvin took his father off to the side and said, "Bonnie and Clyde are going to kill me. I want you to go to the governor of Texas, who at that time was Ma Ferguson, and tell her that if she will give me a pardon, we will get Bonnie and Clyde." Old man Methvin at once contacted the governor. She at once issued a pardon, which reads, "You shall be freed of all crimes of which you've been accused." Methvin goes back to his son and tells him everything is set. Now it's up to you. Henry tells his father one of these nights, "I'm not going to show up. So the next morning, I know Bonnie and Clyde will be back here after me. You be sure and have the officers out here to the road where this killing is going to take place." 2 or 3 days passed. Bonnie and Clyde drove into the Methvin home and said, "Something's happened to Henry. We sent him in after a sandwich in Shreveport, and he didn't show up. Now, don't worry. Henry'll steal a car. He'll get back here some way. He'll be here tomorrow morning. We'll be back and pick him up at 9 o'clock in the morning." Old man Methvin now calls the officers who are waiting in a hotel in Shreveport. They come out to this road, and they waited. At 8:30 the next morning, old man Methvin starts into town with a truck. As he reached the top of the hill, the officers step out on the road, and they said, "Say, where are you going?" Methvin says, "I'm going in after some groceries." Well, the officers said, "Now, what's the idea? You told us to be here at 9 o'clock, and you're going into town at 8:30. Now, this don't make much sense. Tell you what you do. You pull your car to the wrong side of the road, and you take the front wheel off and pretend you have tire trouble. And don't you let out a word, because if you do, we'll kill you just like we're going to kill Bonnie and Clyde." Well, old man Methvin made the officers promise. He said, "Now, if my son's in this car, there's to be no shooting. I'll walk over to the side of the car, and if Henry is in the car, I won't say a word. If Henry's not in this car, I'll say, 'Where is Henry?' Now, that's your signal to close in." That morning at 9 o'clock in the morning, far up the road, approached Bonnie and Clyde. As they reached the top of the hill, Clyde, seeing old man Methvin in trouble, stopped. Methvin walked up to the side of the car and said, "Where's Henry?" Now, everything had gone just as planned with the officers in the trees. But from the other direction was approaching another wagon load of lumber. This had not been figured on. After all, this was a public road. Anyone could come up and down this road. Clyde noticed the truck approaching, and it would be impossible for 3 cars to pass at this point in the road. It looked like Clyde decided to pull around back of the Methvin truck and maybe go back and help the old man. The officers in the trees, seeing their opportunity, they shouted for them to halt. Clyde at once went for his gun. Bonnie let out a terrible scream, and from those trees came a deadly blast of lead. Now I know the question you want to ask. What happened to Henry Methvin? Well, Henry showed up in the sheriff's office in Shreveport, Louisiana, the next day for his clothes, and the United States Marshal was waiting there with a warrant for his arrest for the killing of Cal Camel in Commerce, Oklahoma. Remember the pardon? You shall be freed of all crimes of which you've been accused. Now, he's never been accused of this crime. He was taken back to the state of Oklahoma. In September 1935, Henry Methvin went on trial in the District Court of Ottawa County at Miami, Oklahoma. Henry Methvin was found guilty of his part in the murder of Cal Camel. He was sentenced to be electrocuted in the Oklahoma State Penitentiary at McAllister. How do we know all these facts? If you had attended the trial with me, you would have heard how Mr. and Mrs. Methvin hitchhiked from Louisiana to testify at the trial, how they made possible the killing of Clyde Barrow and Bonnie Parker. The governor, hearing about this testimony, on an appeal, the state criminal court ruled that the punishment was excessive, and on September the 18th, 1936, Henry Methvin's sentence was commuted to imprisonment for life at hard labor. On March the 20th, 1942, Henry Methvin was paroled. Now let's go back to the motion picture. You can see why this character, C.W. Moss, in the motion picture was created. I think the Texas Ranger in the motion picture was handled poorly. It left you with the feeling that he was a big boob. This man was one of the great men in Texas history, the last of the famous Texas Rangers. He certainly was no boob, as portrayed in the motion picture of Bonnie and Clyde. What happened to Blanche Barrow? After the battle in Dexter, Iowa, her husband, Buck Barrow, died in a hospital in Perry, Iowa. Directly after the killing of Bonnie and Clyde, in the back end of this car was found a young arsenal, automatic rifles, pistols, machine guns, and over 1,500 rounds of ammunition and license plates from a dozen different states. Personal belongings like Clyde's saxophone, popular sheet music of this era. Among Bonnie's personal belongings was found several poems she had written. It is too bad she did not apply her talent to a more useful life. There has been many versions of the story of Bonnie and Clyde in poem. But now I would like to read to you the poem of Bonnie and Clyde as written by Bonnie Parker and as we found it in the death car. The story of Bonnie and Clyde. You've read the story of Jesse James, of how he lived and died. If you're still in need of something to read, here's the story of Bonnie and Clyde. Now, Bonnie and Clyde are the Barrow Gang. I am sure you all have read how they rob and steal, and those who squeal are usually found dying or dead. There's lots of untruth to these write-ups. They're not so ruthless as that. Their nature is raw. They hate all the law, the stool pigeons, spotters, and rats. They call them cold-blooded killers. They say they're heartless and mean. But I say this with pride, that I once knew Clyde when he was honest and upright and clean. But the laws fooled around, kept taking him down and locking him up in a cell, till he said to me, I'll never be free, so I'll meet a few of them in hell. The road was so dimly lighted, there were no highway signs to guide. But they made up their minds if all roads were blind, they wouldn't give up till they died. The road gets dimmer and dimmer. Sometimes you can hardly see. But it's fight man to man and do all you can, for they know they never can be free. From heartbreak, some people have suffered. From weariness, some people have died. But take it all in all, our troubles are small till we get like Bonnie and Clyde. If a policeman is killed in Dallas and they have no clue or guide, if they can't find a fiend, they just wipe their slate clean and hang it on Bonnie and Clyde. There's 2 crimes committed in America, not a credit to the Barrow mob. They had no hand in the kidnap demand nor the Kansas City Depot job. A newsboy once said to his buddy, "I wished old Clyde would get jumped. In these awful hard times, we'd make a few dimes if 5 or 6 cops would get bumped." The police haven't got the report yet, but Clyde called me up today. He said, "Don't start any fights. We aren't working nights. We're joining the NRA." From Irving to West Dallas Viaduct is known as the Great Divide, where the women are kin and the men are men, and they won't stool on Bonnie and Clyde. If they try to act like citizens and rent them a nice little flat, about the 3rd night they're invited to fight by a submachine guns, rat-tat-tat. They don't think they're too smart or desperate. They know that the law always wins. They've been shot at before, but they do not ignore that death is the wages of sin. Someday they'll go down together. They'll bury them side by side. To a few it'll be grief, to the law relief, but it's death for Bonnie and Clyde.
Wow, right? I mean, the first thing I got to say about that is you got, again, who is this guy? This is a guy that traveled for decades with family members, witnesses, Dylan's dad, for Pete's sake, in a carnival type setting with this car and people telling stories and telling their firsthand accounts of these things and stories fitting together. When I hear him say it, my first thing is he's so close. The things that I've found out that, from the back end since this man has made this speech, this was 67. So since then, fits what he's saying. It's just he doesn't have all of it, and a lot of information on Mifflin and what happened to him afterwards and how they got him for the Oklahoma thing and what happened to him. And of course, train, so that hits me. The poem that she wrote, of course, when they found cars and, places that they had been staying, she left a lot of these poems. And that was one of the most famous ones, the Ballad of Bonnie and Clyde that she wrote, that he read. And, a lot of people tell that last piece, it'll be death for Bonnie and Clyde. They knew they were going to die. And deservedly so. There was nothing that they could do. Hammer was quoted as saying many a time, if you could get her away from him, if they could get a shot at Clyde, they have orders basically to take out everybody. Everybody. They just want to just end it. No stragglers, take no prisoners. That's what the orders were given. And that's what they're following. And they're trying hard, and Galton and him have been through a lot together and are wrestling with it and understand the fact that they can't let them go. Everywhere they go, they're killing a cop or whatever, and it's getting worse. They've got a lot of firepower. They've got a lot of movement about them. They were all over the place. You know what I mean? So he's got a lot of information from a collective for back then in late 60s. He's got a lot of information, and it was interesting to listen to him. But one thing I wanted to do, Donnie, before we go, I know you had a story for us. I hadn't forgotten. But if this is the right video, I wanted to play this because nobody ever talks about the victims, and I wanted to give them a little space tonight before we get out of here. I think this is correct. If not, I'll take it down. I think it is.
murders and bank jobs, Bonnie and Clyde were boldly keeping a rendezvous with some of their henchmen near Grapevine, Texas. While they waited, they drank whiskey, made love to each other, and practiced their marksman by shooting at birds. Presently, 2 state highway patrol officers sighted the pair. They decide to investigate. They approach Bonnie and Clyde totally unaware of their identity.
Donnie does look knackered. Donnie, are you okay?
Yeah, I'm okay.
We're almost out. I think that this is correct. A lot of people use this footage. This is just another... I think this is right. Hang on, let me check something. Hold on. I want to be sure this is right. A second, let me check something. Let me switch out because I don't want to drag you through that again. Yep, this is it. This is what I wanted to play you.
By the spring of 1933, Bonnie and Clyde's criminal odyssey was into its 2nd year. Now, 2 new travelers joined the ride. Clyde's brother, Buck, who was just recently paroled from prison, and his wife, Blanche. Both were welcomed additions to the gang. In April, the 2 couples and a young criminal protege named W.D. Jones were holed up in an apartment in Joplin, Missouri, taking a break from the road.
Of all the places you could have picked to go for a vacation if you were on the run from the law, Joplin was a hotbed of bootleggers. So the cops were always on the lookout for anybody suspicious.
On April 13th, the local authorities decided to investigate the Barrow Gang's hideout. John Harriman, a farmer moonlighting as a part-time peace officer, approached the house with Joplin police. They were armed only with pistols.
Here are these Joplin cops thinking we're going to bust a couple of bootleggers. And instead, as one of them swings a car up to block the driveway so no one can get out, through the actual garage door comes this blast of powerful gunfire. And of course, it's the Barrow Gang.
If you're in a gunfight and all you got is a little pistol and you hear that BAR go off, you know that it's time to go home.
Harriman died at the scene. His colleague, Joplin policeman Harry McGinnis, was so riddled with bullets, his arm was nearly detached. He would die before daybreak.
Well, there you go, man. I mean, that's the reality of it. That's the victims, and I wanted to make sure we talked about them a little bit tonight. That young man that was gunned down Easter morning in Grapevine, just going up to see if he could help out, a car breaking down or whatever. And he's going to get married in like 12 days. His fiance wore a wedding dress to his funeral. These are real people. None of them deserved it, you know. But these kids went wrong for a reason somewhere along the line. They were people just like us. And I just believe that if you're interested in it, look and rationalize and try to find the truth, because the story's been twisted so much. And like I said, not that they're not guilty, it's just, if they didn't do it, somebody else did, and the cops that are laying there dead and the victims deserve to have their story told correctly too. So I think that's important. Donnie, you had something real quick you wanted to lead us out with on this thing right here, I believe. Did you want to tell it real quick?
Yeah, hold on. Just let me just bring up some notes because I forgot. I gotta remember the
Sure, take your
name
time.
of the
This one
place.
here, I think it was,
Okay.
wasn't it?
Yeah, that's the
Donnie's
Baker
got something
Hotel.
for us.
This is like an old abandoned hotel. It's called the Baker Hotel. Um, it's in Texas, and people who've worked there and previous guests, they claim that they've seen the ghosts of Bonnie and Clyde because apparently that they stayed there at one point in the beginning of their relationship.
Oh.
And so there's a ghost of a couple that is often seen like dancing in the ballroom and drinking and laughing and having a good time. And people claim that it's Bonnie and Clyde, but I'm like, wait, but they only stayed there once. That could be any couple. So
Well, yeah, that's true. But,
yeah.
too, I mean, we know as, paranormal possibilities,
The
they can,
other,
they can go where they choose. And I would imagine they would be together. I would imagine for sure, Donnie, they would be
but that
together.
doesn't mean that those two
And I
people are
doubt they would
Bonnie
have
and
crossed.
Clyde.
No, no. I
Yeah,
totally get what you're
yeah.
saying. But I'm saying it's possible. Because
The
Marilyn Monroe was seen in multiple places.
Yeah,
And for
yeah.
some
I think it's
reason,
possible too. I just don't
and
think that it's likely that
yeah,
it's
and
her.
I
Yeah.
believe it's widely understood amongst people that have communicated with her, not me, that she has crossed over. She chooses to come back and visit. She likes to, when she's talked about, she shows
Mhm.
up, Marilyn. So if
Yeah.
she do that, I would imagine. But I also
Um,
I know nothing about it. I don't know if they're here or not. But
there's another place that is reputedly haunted with the ghosts of Bonnie and Clyde, and that's actually the spot on the highway where they were gunned down.
mm,
It's Highway 154 in Louisiana, like northern Louisiana.
okay,
Um, and it's basically like people who go down that stretch of highway, they claim, and there have been stories that people who've gone down that stretch at night hear the sounds of a woman screaming, gunfire. Um, People get like weird, eerie feelings there when they drive through there at certain times.
yeah.
And yeah, there have always been rumors swirling around that spot again of like the residual haunting of like when they actually died. Um, Another spot where they say might be haunted is the actual car itself, because
I'm here.
all right, it's the car itself because it's actually on display at a casino in Nevada, in Trim Valley, Nevada, and supposedly people who work at that casino have made that claim that it's haunted. Like people who go up to that car, they experience eerie feelings. Some people claim that they've taken pictures of the car and there's actually apparitions in the seats. But I actually went looking for those pictures and I couldn't find any, so I'm not quite sure about that. But yeah.
Look who came up here to say goodnight.
Yeah.
That was
Hey.
fantastic, Donnie. I didn't even know. I didn't look and see if there was any
I
ghosts.
feel like Steve would actually know better
Yeah.
more about
Well,
that than I would, because that's like
we'll
right in
ask.
his neck of the woods. That's in Nevada.
We'll ask Steve tomorrow. We're doing a little Dillinger tomorrow with Steve on
Yeah.
Monday Madness. I hope we all join us. And Donnie, how is your wrist? People are asking, and I was trying to make sure that Donnie didn't have to do a lot of typing this time.
Oh, thank you for that. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's okay. It's, you know what, it's weird. During the daytime it feels a lot better, but then like at night for some reason it like acts up more. I'm like, I don't know what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can believe that car is
Keep
haunted.
doing what you're doing and find that
Yeah.
claw. Yeah, keep doing what
But
you're doing
yeah,
and find that
I'm able
claw.
to play video games, so that's the good news, folks. That's the good news.
I think somebody says it's time for good night. Good night, everybody. Thanks for staying so late with us. It was a lot of information. Basically all I'm saying is, you know, the facts are important, and a lot of them are coming out, and they should. I mean, 90 years, gosh. I mean, it wouldn't be the first story we dug on. So good night.
Oh, Cisco, Steve said he actually has a story about that car.
Oh, really? Oh,
Oh, and
please
he's
tell
gonna
it
tell it
tomorrow night.
tomorrow.
That's great. That's something to look forward to.
Yeah.
That's fantastic. Something to look forward to. And oh, that's awesome. Yeah, great.
Nice.
Yeah, I mean, I can imagine, and Edna, everybody that would absolutely, and that's what got me thinking too. I was thinking, would they have crossed? I don't think they would have, but I don't know. You don't know. We don't know anything. This is just something we're looking at. I thought it was very interesting for the times, all those facts that have come out and how they shifted that whole story. And it's such a famous story. So many people see it and think it's real. And that's what I said in the beginning. That's what they do to us when they lie like that. And the author that I was listening to that wrote On the Road with Bonnie and Clyde and a couple of other books about it, he is really quite the expert on this, um, was saying that he does not understand why they take such a story that's perfectly fine the way it is, but so important to history to see the way law enforcement was and what they had to deal with and what people had to deal with back then. And, why, with such a burst in criminals and, everything, what causes all this? Because we're supposed to learn from it, you know? And so it's important to learn from it with some facts. So there's some, if you're interested in the story, look into that. All that stuff is available on YouTube. Donnie, it's been awesome. Thank you for your contribution and sticking with it.
Thank
And
you. Thank you for having me on.
and Bonnie and Clyde, pretty interesting, huh? You never quite heard the story
Yeah.
like that before. You heard it from a couple of different decades,
I
and
did learn quite a lot about Bonnie and Clyde like this past week. Quite a
yeah,
lot. Yeah.
yeah. And it's really interesting. There's a couple of good interviews. Look up history versus um, the Highwaymen, and you'll get that author and a lot of great interviews and a lot of good books and very interesting time. And we'll dig in it tomorrow night, I'm guessing. Thanks everybody for coming in. If you're on your way out, please hit the thumbs up if you want to share it. If you got people that like history and make you think. Even if you got to change your mind, it's something you believed pretty much all your life. You know, and you got to kind of twist the way you think about it because you got some new facts, but we say that all the time, don't we, Donnie?
Yep.
I mean, it's that last little bit of information that can change the way you think about something completely, you know? So thanks everybody for being here tonight. Thank you, Ted, so much for your wonderful contribution. Thanks everybody who gives super chats and shares and gets the word out and gets stuff at the T Public, gets crispy gear. And thank you, mods, for helping everybody and welcoming everybody. And good night, Mr. Cho. Go put some ice on your wrist. Thank you so much,
Thanks.
everybody. Good night.
Good night.